You're nothing but a floor scrubber, and you'll stay that way until the day you die." The words echoed through the marble lobby of Hale Industries like a gunshot. Victor Hale, billionaire CEO worth $12 billion, stood over a kneeling janitor whose mop bucket had spilled across imported Italian tile. Employees froze mid-step. Security cameras captured every second. The janitor, Marcus Reed according to his name badge, didn't flinch, didn't apologize, didn't beg. He simply looked up with eyes that had seen things Victor's money could never buy. In that moment, power and dignity collided in a building that would never be the same. Before I continue this story, I invite you to stay with me until the very end. If this story moves you, please like this video and comment with your city so I can see how far this message has traveled across the world. The morning had started like any other Tuesday at Hale Industries' flagship tower in Manhattan. Marcus Reed arrived at 5:47 a.m., 13 minutes before his shift officially began, because he believed in the quiet dignity of punctuality. At 62 years old, he moved with the careful precision of someone who had learned long ago that wasted motion was wasted life. He changed into his gray uniform in the basement locker room, the fabric worn soft from 3 years of wear, and gathered his supplies. The building wouldn't wake for another hour, but Marcus preferred these silent moments when the tower belonged to him and the other overnight crew. People whose names appeared on no executive roster, but whose labor kept the empire functioning. "Morning, Marcus," called Rosa from the third-floor station, her cart already loaded with fresh linens for the executive suites. "Morning, Rosa. Your daughter's recital was last night, wasn't it?" Rosa's face lit up. She was beautiful, played Chopin without a single mistake. "Never doubted it for a second." Marcus smiled, the expression crinkling the corners of eyes that had witnessed things no music recital could erase. "You raised her right." He took the service elevator to the lobby, a space designed to intimidate. 30-foot ceilings, walls of book-matched marble imported from Carrara, a security desk that looked like mission control. The Hale Industries logo, a stylized H that doubled as a crown, dominated the wall behind the reception area in polished chrome letters 8 feet tall. Marcus had cleaned this lobby 5 mornings a week for 3 years. He knew every square foot, every corner where dust accumulated, every place where the morning sun would expose streaks if his work wasn't perfect. He took pride in this knowledge, not because the space mattered, but because excellence was its own reward, regardless of audience. He filled his bucket at the maintenance closet, added exactly 3 capfuls of the pH-neutral cleaner that wouldn't damage the marble, and began his routine. North wall first, working in sections, his movements efficient and methodical. The water in his bucket stayed clear longer than anyone else's because he wrung his mop properly, because he'd learned in another life that attention to detail could mean the difference between success and catastrophic failure. At 6:43 a.m., the first executives began arriving. Marcus had learned to recognize them by their footsteps, the sharp click of designer heels, the confident stride of people who'd never questioned their right to occupy space. They passed him without seeing him, which suited Marcus fine. Invisibility had its advantages. But at 7:15 a.m., the rhythm broke. Victor Hale erupted from the private elevator like a storm system, his phone pressed to his ear, his expression thunderous. At 47, he'd built his father's modest real estate company into a diversified empire spanning 3 continents. Forbes estimated his net worth at $12 billion. The Wall Street Journal called him a visionary. His employees called him brilliant and terrifying in equal measure. "I don't care what the contractors say," Victor barked into his phone. "The Singapore project launches in 6 weeks. They'll work 24/7 if they have to. Triple the crew, quadruple it. I want results, not excuses." He stalked across the lobby, his custom Italian shoes striking the marble like gavels. Marcus, working near the north wall, saw him coming and smoothly moved his bucket aside, creating a clear path. It was a practiced movement, automatic after years of making himself small in the presence of people who never looked down. But this morning, Victor's attention was fractured between his phone call and the folder in his other hand, some crisis demanding simultaneous attention. He didn't see the bucket. His foot caught the rim. The bucket tipped. 3 gallons of soapy water spread across the marble in a rapidly expanding pool. Victor stopped mid-sentence. The lobby went silent. 15 people froze. Executives, security personnel, the receptionist who'd just arrived for her shift. Everyone understood that something terrible had just shifted in the air. What the hell? Victor's voice was quiet, which somehow made it more dangerous than shouting. He looked down at his shoes, at his pants now soaked to mid-calf, at the water still spreading across his perfect floor. Then he looked at Marcus. "Sir, I apologize," Marcus said calmly, already moving to contain the spill. "Let me get this cleaned up immediately." "You apologize?" Victor's voice rose now, the phone call forgotten, his full attention focused like a laser. "Do you have any idea what these shoes cost? What this suit costs?" "No, sir." Marcus kept his voice level, his hands steady as he positioned his mop to begin absorbing the water. $23,000. This suit costs $23,000. That's more than you make in 6 months scrubbing floors. Marcus said nothing, just continued working. He'd learned long ago that silence was often the best defense against rage. But his silence seemed to infuriate Victor further. "Look at me when I'm talking to you." Marcus straightened slowly, meeting Victor's eyes. In another life, he'd perfected the art of the neutral expression, the face that revealed nothing while assessing everything. He used it now. "What's your name?" Victor demanded. "Marcus Reed, sir." "Well, Marcus Reed, do you know what I was doing when your incompetence ruined my morning? I was on a call that could make or break a $200 million deal. But now, instead of focusing on that, I'm standing in a puddle because you can't handle the simple task of mopping a floor without destroying everything around you. I understand your frustration, sir. Again, I apologize." Victor stepped closer, and Marcus caught the scent of cologne that probably cost more than his monthly rent. "Do you? Do you really understand? Because from where I'm standing, you're just another minimum wage worker who can't grasp that actions have consequences." The lobby remained frozen. Somewhere, an elevator dinged. No one moved. "Let me explain something to you, Marcus Reed." Victor's voice carried now, projecting to the growing audience of employees who'd stopped to watch. "This building? I built it. Every brick, every window, every square foot represents my vision, my work, my sacrifice. People like you, you're interchangeable, replaceable. You think mopping floors matters? It doesn't. You could vanish tomorrow and we'd have someone else doing your job by afternoon." Marcus absorbed the words the way he'd once absorbed incoming fire, with stillness, with tactical awareness, with the understanding that reaction was often exactly what the enemy wanted. "You're nothing but a floor scrubber," Victor continued, his voice dropping to something almost intimate in its cruelty, "and you'll stay that way until the day you die. That's your ceiling. That's your worth. So when you spill water on a man who actually matters, the least you can do is show some awareness of the gap between us." The silence that followed was absolute. Someone's phone buzzed, absurdly loud in the quiet. No one answered it. Marcus held Victor's gaze for 3 seconds longer. Then he nodded once, a gesture so slight it barely qualified as movement. "I'll get this cleaned up right away, sir," he said quietly. He turned back to his work, and something in the deliberateness of the movement, the complete absence of hurry or fear, seemed to penetrate Victor's anger. For a brief moment, uncertainty flickered across the CEO's face, as if he'd glimpsed something unexpected and couldn't quite process it. But the moment passed. Victor turned away, already pulling his phone back to his ear. "Get me a car," he snapped at someone. "I need to go home and change, and someone find out how our cleaning staff is supervised. This is unacceptable." He strode toward the exit, leaving wet footprints across the marble. The crowd dispersed slowly, people returning to their routines with the cautious movements of witnesses to an accident. Marcus cleaned up the spill with the same methodical precision he applied to everything. He contained the water, mopped the floor in overlapping strokes, dried the area with towels, then cleaned it again to ensure no residue remained. The work took 17 minutes. When he finished, the marble gleamed as if nothing had happened. Rosa found him in the maintenance closet afterward, putting away his supplies. "Marcus, I'm so sorry," she said, her voice tight with emotion. He shouldn't have." "It's fine, Rosa." "It's not fine. Everyone heard what he said. Everyone saw." "Rosa." Marcus's voice was gentle but firm. "It's fine. I've survived worse than words. But he had no right to talk to you like that. You're one of the best people in this building. You help everyone. You never complain. She stopped, looking at him with eyes that suddenly seemed to see past the uniform. "There's something about you. I've thought it before. The way you carry yourself, like you've done important things." Marcus smiled, a real smile this time, sad around the edges. "I've done things. Whether they were important, that's not for me to judge." "Will you report him? HR should hear about this." "Report the CEO to HR?" Marcus shook his head. "That's not how the world works, and we both know it." "Then what will you do?" "I'll finish my shift, go home, come back tomorrow, same as always." Rosa studied him for a long moment. "You're a better person than I am. I'd want revenge." "Revenge is expensive, Rosa. It costs you more than the person you're trying to hurt." He paused, his hand resting on the handle of his mop bucket. "Besides, some people carry their own punishment. They just don't know it yet." After Rosa left, Marcus stood alone in the maintenance closet, surrounded by bottles of industrial cleaner and boxes of paper towels. He looked down at his hands, scarred, calloused, steady. Once upon a time, these hands had held very different tools. He rolled up his left sleeve slowly, exposing the faded tattoo on his forearm. Most of the image had blurred with age and sun exposure, but the outline remained visible if you knew what you were looking for. An eagle clutching a rifle, wrapped in a ribbon that bore a motto in Latin. Beneath it, a series of numbers that had once meant everything and now meant nothing to anyone but him. Marcus traced the tattoo with one finger, remembering. Then he pulled his sleeve down and returned to work. The rest of the morning proceeded normally. He cleaned the executive bathrooms on the 12th floor, emptied trash bins, restocked paper products. At 10:30 a.m., he took his break in the basement cafeteria, a space for maintenance staff, security personnel, and other employees whose roles kept the building functioning but whose presence upstairs was discouraged. "Heard what happened this morning," said Tommy Chen, one of the building engineers, as he sat down across from Marcus. "Hale really went off on you." "It was a spill. Things happen. Man, I would have lost it. The way he talked to you, like you're not even human." Marcus took a sip of his coffee, black with no sugar, the way he'd learned to drink it, when cream and sugar were luxuries that added weight to a pack. Getting angry wouldn't have changed anything, would have just made it worse. "You're too calm about this." Tommy leaned forward, lowering his voice. "There's a pool going around. Some folks think you're going to quit. Others think you'll do something crazy. But me? I think you're planning something we can't see yet." Marcus almost laughed. "I'm a janitor, Tommy, not a strategist." "That's what you want people to think." Tommy's eyes narrowed. "But I've worked around enough people to know. The truly dangerous ones don't look dangerous. They look like you." "I'm 62 years old, and I clean floors for a living. I promise you, I'm exactly what I appear to be." Tommy stood up, gathering his lunch tray. "If you say so. But my grandfather fought in Korea. He had that same look you got, like he'd seen the whole world try to kill him and failed. Just saying, some people carry their history in their eyes." After Tommy left, Marcus sat alone with his coffee, staring at nothing. The conversation had stirred memories he usually kept buried, fragments of another life surfacing like debris after a storm. He remembered the last time someone had questioned his worth. Captain Reeves, during a classified briefing in a tent somewhere in the Hindu Kush. "Reed, your plan is insane. You're asking me to authorize a 12-man team to infiltrate a compound with 200 hostiles. The casualty projections are unacceptable." Marcus had looked at his superior officer with the same calm he'd shown Victor Hale that morning. "With respect, sir, the casualty projections assume we fight them. We won't. We'll be ghosts. In, extract the target. Out. They'll never know we were there until we're gone." The mission had worked. 13 hostages rescued, 0 friendly casualties, the enemy compound still searching for answers when Marcus's team was already across the border. It had earned him a commendation he'd never been allowed to discuss publicly, and a reputation that had followed him through the rest of his career. But that was another man, another lifetime. Captain Marcus Reed had retired 7 years ago, turned in his security clearance, and walked away from everything he'd known. The transition had been harder than combat. He'd tried consulting work, corporate security, even teaching. Nothing fit. The civilian world moved too slow and too fast at the same time, full of manufactured urgency about things that didn't matter, and dangerous apathy about things that did. 3 years ago, He'd seen a help wanted sign at Hale Industries. Janitorial staff needed. He'd applied on impulse, expecting nothing. When they hired him, he discovered something unexpected: peace. The work was simple, honest, visible. When he cleaned something, it stayed clean. When he helped someone, they thanked him. There were no hidden agendas, no classified consequences, no wondering if the mission had accomplished anything meaningful. For 3 years, he'd found something resembling contentment in the routine. Until this morning, when Victor Hale had reminded him of a fundamental truth. The civilian world had hierarchies too, and men with power still believed it gave them permission to diminish others. Marcus finished his coffee and returned to work. The afternoon brought its own rhythms. He cleaned the second-floor conference rooms, where dealmakers plotted their next acquisitions. He restocked the supply closets on floors 7 through 9. He helped Rosa when her cart's wheel broke, improvising a repair with zip ties and duct tape that would hold until maintenance could provide a replacement. At 4:00 p.m., Victor Hale returned to the building in a fresh suit, his earlier anger apparently forgotten, or at least submerged beneath whatever crisis now demanded his attention. Marcus saw him stride past the security desk, already on his phone, already focused on the next battle. But others hadn't forgotten. Throughout the afternoon, Marcus noticed the changed behavior. Executives who usually ignored him now watched him with something like pity. Junior employees offered sympathetic smiles. The security guard at the north entrance, a former cop named Daniel, stopped him during his rounds. "Marcus, I saw the footage from this morning," Daniel said quietly. "From the cameras. That was rough. You okay?" "I'm fine, Daniel." "You shouldn't have to take that kind of treatment. There are policies that will get me fired if I use them against the CEO." Marcus kept his voice neutral. "But I appreciate your concern." Daniel hesitated, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. "My cousin's a labor lawyer. If you want to pursue this, she'd probably take the case. What Hale did, public humiliation, hostile work environment, there might be something there." Marcus took the card out of politeness, but knew he'd never use it. "Thank you, really. But I'm not looking for legal action. I'm looking to finish my shift and go home." As he walked away, he felt Daniel's eyes on his back, confused and perhaps disappointed by his lack of fight. People always expected drama, confrontation, justice served hot in public. But Marcus had learned long ago that the most effective victories were often quiet, achieved through patience and the long game rather than immediate satisfaction. At 6:00 p.m., as his shift neared its end, Marcus was cleaning the lobby one final time when a young woman approached him. She couldn't have been more than 30, dressed in the casual, expensive way of tech executives, carrying a laptop bag that probably cost more than Marcus's monthly salary. "Excuse me," she said. "Are you Marcus Reed?" "I am." "I'm Sarah Chen. I work on the 14th floor. She paused, seeming to gather courage. "I wanted to apologize." "For what?" "For this morning. I was there. I saw what Mr. Hale said to you. And I didn't say anything. None of us did. We just stood there and watched him tear you apart. And we let it happen." Marcus studied her face, reading genuine remorse there. "Ms. Chen, you don't need to apologize for someone else's behavior." "But I should have said something. I should have—" She stopped, frustrated with herself. "My parents immigrated from Taiwan with nothing. My father worked as a janitor for 15 years while putting himself through night school. I should know better than to let someone treat another person like Mr. Hale treated you." "Your father sounds like a man who understood the value of honest work." "He is." Sarah blinked rapidly, fighting tears. "And he taught me that dignity doesn't come from your job title. It comes from how you treat others and how you handle yourself when things are hard. This morning, you showed more dignity in 30 seconds than most people show in a lifetime." Marcus felt something shift in his chest, some small crack in the armor he'd carefully maintained. "Thank you for saying that. It means more than you know." Sarah reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. "I know this doesn't fix anything, but there's a coffee shop on the corner. This is a gift card. Maybe you can get yourself something nice. On me." "I can't accept that. Please, it's not charity. It's what I should have done this morning instead of standing there silent. Let me do this one small thing. Marcus took the envelope, recognizing that sometimes accepting kindness was its own form of grace. Thank you, Ms. Chen. After she left, Marcus opened the envelope. Inside was a gift card for $50 and a handwritten note. Some people build empires, others build character. I know which matters more. He tucked the note into his pocket and finished his work. At 6:47 p.m., Marcus signed out, changed back into his street clothes, and left through the basement exit. The October evening was cool, the sky fading from blue to purple, the city's lights beginning their nightly domination of the darkness. He walked to the subway station 3 blocks away, moving through crowds of people rushing home to families, to dinners, to lives that existed beyond the towers of steel and glass. On the train, pressed between a teenager absorbed in her phone and a man sleeping against the window, Marcus thought about Victor Hale's words. You're nothing but a floor scrubber, and you'll stay that way until the day you die. It wasn't the first time someone had tried to define his worth by his circumstances. In his previous life, people had made assumptions based on his rank, his uniform, his lack of formal education. They'd underestimated him, dismissed him, written him off. And every time, he'd proven them wrong, not through boasting or confrontation, but through quiet competence and the patient accumulation of results. But this was different. He'd chosen this life, this work, this deliberate step back from a world of consequence and command. He'd made peace with invisibility. Or so he'd thought. The truth Marcus recognized as the train rattled through the darkness was simpler and more uncomfortable. Victor Hale's cruelty had revealed something he'd been avoiding. He'd told himself he was at peace. He'd convinced himself that he'd moved past needing recognition or respect. But the anger he felt now, sitting on a subway car at the end of a long day, proved that false. He was still human, still vulnerable, still capable of being wounded by words from a man who knew nothing about him. The question was what to do with that knowledge. Marcus exited at his stop in Queens, a neighborhood of aging apartment buildings and corner stores, of immigrants and retirees and working families holding on to the middle class by their fingernails. His apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building that had seen better decades, a 1-bedroom space he kept meticulously clean and sparsely furnished. He unlocked his door, dropped his keys in the bowl by the entrance, and stood for a moment in the silence. Then he moved to the small closet by the bathroom and reached up to the top shelf, pushing aside winter sweaters until his hand found the lockbox he kept there. Inside the lockbox were the remnants of his previous life. His service medals, still in their presentation cases. His retirement papers. A photograph of his team, 12 men standing in desert camouflage, all of them squinting against the sun, all of them alive in that frozen moment, though 3 were dead now. And at the bottom, wrapped in cloth, his combat infantry badge and the silver star he'd earned during a mission he could never discuss with anyone who didn't have the proper clearance. Marcus lifted out the photograph, studying faces he hadn't looked at in months. Captain Marcus Reed. That's who he'd been. The man who'd led teams into impossible situations and brought them home. The tactical thinker. The problem solver. The leader who'd earned respect not through intimidation, but through competence and care for the people under his command. He'd left that man behind when he retired. Or tried to. But looking at the photograph now, Marcus wondered if you could ever really leave yourself behind, or if the person you'd been simply waited beneath the surface, ready to emerge when circumstances demanded it. He wrapped the photograph carefully and returned it to the lockbox. Then he made himself dinner, chicken breast, brown rice, steamed broccoli, the utilitarian meal of someone who viewed food as fuel rather than pleasure. He ate at his small table, reading a biography of Grant he'd checked out from the library, letting the familiar story of persistence and quiet competence wash over him. At 9:00 p.m., his phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but the area code was local. Mr. Reed? The voice was professional, female, uncertain. This is Jennifer Walsh. I'm the Human Resources Director at Hale Industries. I'm calling about the incident this morning. Marcus set down his book. Miss Walsh? I wanted to reach out personally to discuss what happened. I've reviewed the security footage, and I've spoken with several witnesses. Mr. Hale's behavior was... She paused, choosing words carefully. It was inappropriate and unacceptable. I appreciate you calling. We take workplace dignity very seriously at Hale Industries. I want you to know that we're prepared to take action. If you'd like to file a formal complaint, I can assure you it will be handled at the highest levels, with complete confidentiality and protection against retaliation. Marcus heard what she wasn't saying, that the company was terrified of a lawsuit, that his humiliation had been witnessed by too many people to sweep under the carpet, that they needed his cooperation to contain the damage. "That won't be necessary," he said. Silence on the other end. "I'm sorry, I don't think I heard you correctly. You don't wish to file a complaint?" "That's correct." "Mr. Reed, I want to make sure you understand your rights in this situation. What Mr. Hale said to you constitutes harassment. You would have grounds for—" "Miss Walsh, I understand my rights. I'm choosing not to pursue action. I'd like to put this behind us and continue doing my job." Another pause, longer this time. "May I ask why?" Marcus considered the question. "Because filing a complaint won't change anything that matters. Mr. Hale would be forced to issue an apology he doesn't mean. The company would be forced to discipline him in some meaningless way. Everyone would be uncomfortable for a few weeks, and then things would go back to exactly how they were. The only difference is that I'd be marked as a troublemaker, and my time at the company would have an expiration date. I can promise you, with respect, Ms. Walsh, you can't promise anything that would survive the realities of corporate politics. But I do appreciate you calling. It says something about the company that you reached out." Jennifer Walsh sighed, a sound of frustration mixed with relief. "You're a better man than most, Mr. Reed. For what it's worth, I think what happened to you was wrong, and I think Mr. Hale should face consequences. Sometimes the most meaningful consequences are the ones people impose on themselves," Marcus said. "But thank you. Really." After the call ended, Marcus sat in silence, thinking about roads not taken and battles not fought. Then he returned to his book, losing himself in the story of another man who'd been underestimated, dismissed, and ultimately vindicated by history. But sleep, when it finally came after midnight, brought dreams of sand and heat and the weight of command, of decisions made in seconds that echoed across years, of the thin line between the man he'd been and the man he'd become. And in the morning, when his alarm rang at 5:15 a.m., Marcus Reed rose, dressed in his gray uniform, and prepared to return to Hale Industries, where a billionaire CEO believed he'd won a battle that had barely begun. The subway platform Wednesday morning was more crowded than usual, a mechanical failure somewhere uptown forcing commuters into tighter spaces, shorter tempers. Marcus stood near a support column, his lunch bag in one hand, watching the organized chaos of people trying to get to jobs that would consume their day and return them here 12 hours later, exhausted and diminished. A young mother struggled with a stroller and 2 shopping bags while her toddler cried. Without thinking, Marcus stepped forward and lifted one of the bags. "Here, let me help you onto the train." She looked up, startled, then grateful. "Thank you. God, thank you. Everything fell apart this morning, and I'm late for daycare, and—" "It's okay," Marcus said quietly, guiding the stroller through the crowd as the train doors opened. "We've all had mornings like that." He helped her aboard, handed her the bag, and stepped back as the doors closed. She waved through the window, mouthing, "Thank you," again. The train pulled away, and Marcus waited for the next one, arriving at Hale Industries at 5:52 a.m., 5 minutes later than his usual time, but still 8 minutes before his shift began. The lobby was quiet, familiar. Marcus changed into his uniform and began his routine. But something felt different. Eyes followed him more than usual. Conversation stopped when he entered a room. By 7 o'clock a.m., as the building filled with early arrivals, the attention became impossible to ignore. "Morning, Marcus," said a junior accountant he'd never spoken to before. "How are you doing today?" "Fine, thank you." "Really? Because after yesterday, we all saw—" The young man fumbled for words. "Just wanted you to know that some of us think what happened was messed up." Marcus nodded politely and moved on, but the pattern repeated throughout the morning. A paralegal on the 8th floor, an IT specialist on the 12th, a marketing coordinator who stopped him in the hallway to say that her father had been a janitor too, and no one deserved to be treated that way. By mid-morning, Marcus understood what was happening. Victor Hale's public humiliation of him had created a kind of folk hero out of the quiet janitor who'd absorbed the attack with dignity. People were projecting their own experiences onto him, their own encounters with powerful people who'd made them feel small. He'd become a symbol, which was exactly what he'd hoped to avoid. At 10:15 a.m., Marcus was restocking paper towels in the 14th floor men's room when he heard voices in the hallway outside, low and intense. Complete disaster from a PR perspective, someone was saying. The footage has already leaked. Someone sent it to that workplace gossip site, and now it's making the rounds on social media. How bad? That was Jennifer Walsh, the HR director who'd called him last night. Bad. Victor. Humiliating a janitor plays into every negative narrative about corporate culture and wealth inequality. We're already getting media inquiries. Has Victor seen it? He's in meetings all morning, but he's going to have to address this. The board is concerned about optics. The board should be concerned about treating human beings with basic decency, Jennifer said sharply. But I suppose that's secondary to protecting the stock price. The voices faded as they moved down the hall. Marcus finished stocking the paper towels, his movements automatic while his mind processed the new information. The incident was spreading beyond the building, taking on a life he couldn't control. Private humiliation, becoming public spectacle. He was heading back to the service elevator when he nearly collided with a woman emerging from one of the executive offices. She was in her early 40s, elegant in the way money made effortless, with Victor Hale's distinctive jaw and penetrating eyes. "I'm so sorry," she said, steadying herself. "I wasn't watching where I—" She stopped, looking at his name badge, recognition dawning. "You're Marcus Reed." "Yes, ma'am." "I'm Catherine Hale, Victor's sister." She extended her hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Marcus shook it. Her grip was firm, businesslike. "I was hoping I might run into you. Do you have a moment?" Marcus glanced at his cart, then back at her. "Of course." Catherine gestured to a small conference room nearby, empty at this hour. They stepped inside and she closed the door behind them, creating a pocket of privacy in the transparent building. "I saw what my brother did yesterday," she said without preamble. "I watched the security footage this morning. I wanted to apologize to you directly." "That's kind of you, Ms. Hale, but you're not responsible for your brother's actions." "No, but I'm responsible for my own silence. I work on this floor. I was in my office when it happened. I heard the commotion and I looked out and I saw—" She paused, something like shame crossing her face. "I saw him destroying you in front of everyone, and I went back to my desk. I told myself it wasn't my business, that getting involved would only make things worse, that Victor was under stress and would calm down eventually." Marcus said nothing, letting her work through whatever she needed to say. "But that's cowardice dressed up as pragmatism, isn't it?" Catherine moved to the window, looking out over the city. "I've watched my brother become someone I barely recognize. The business success, the money, the power. It's changed him. Or maybe it just revealed who he always was underneath. Either way, I've enabled it by staying silent. Ms. Hale, I appreciate you coming to me, but honestly, I'm fine. I've dealt with worse than harsh words." She turned back to him, studying his face with an intensity that reminded him of intelligence officers he'd worked with, people trained to see past surfaces. "You have, haven't you? There's something about you, the way you stood there yesterday, completely calm while my brother tried to annihilate your dignity. Most people would have broken down or lashed out. You just absorbed it and kept your composure. That kind of control doesn't come from nowhere." Marcus felt a flash of warning, the instinct that had kept him alive in situations where a wrong word could mean death. "I'm just someone who's learned that losing your temper rarely improves a situation." "I think you're considerably more than that, Mr. Reed. But I can respect that you'd rather keep your privacy." Catherine pulled a business card from her pocket. "I serve on the board here, which means I have some influence over company policy. If you decide you want to pursue action against my brother, formal complaint, legal options, whatever, I want you to know you'd have support, powerful support." Marcus took the card but made no promises. "Why would you go against your own brother?" "Because power without accountability is tyranny, even in a corporate setting, maybe especially in a corporate setting, where people's livelihoods depend on the whims of executives who forget they're dealing with human beings." She moved toward the door, then paused. My father built this company on the principle that every person matters, from the CEO to the maintenance staff. Victor's forgotten that. Someone needs to remind him. After she left, Marcus stood alone in the conference room looking at the card in his hand. Catherine Hale's private number. An offer of alliance from inside the family structure itself. It was the kind of leverage most people in his position would seize immediately. Marcus tucked the card in his pocket and returned to work. Lunch break brought another surprise. Marcus was eating his sandwich in the basement cafeteria when Daniel, the security guard, appeared at his table with another man in tow, late 30s, fit, carrying himself with the particular awareness of someone trained in threat assessment. Marcus, this is Eric Brennan, Daniel said. He works corporate security on the executive floors. Eric, this is the guy I was telling you about. Eric extended his hand and Marcus caught the subtle shift in the man's posture when they shook. Recognition of the calluses, the grip strength, the way Marcus's handshake conveyed both respect and readiness. Daniel showed me the footage from yesterday, Eric said, sitting down uninvited. Also showed me some of your other behavior on the security feeds, the way you move through the building, your situational awareness, the way you assess spaces when you enter them. He paused. You have training. Marcus took a bite of his sandwich, chewing slowly. I know how to clean floors, if that's what you mean. Military, Eric continued, ignoring the deflection. Not regular army either. Something specialized. I did 8 years with the Rangers, and you've got markers I recognize. The way you stood yesterday when Hale was in your face, that wasn't a janitor taking abuse. That was a professional maintaining composure under hostile engagement. Your imagination is very active, Mr. Brennan. Daniel leaned forward. Marcus, we're not trying to blow up your spot. We're trying to understand who we've been working alongside for 3 years. Because if you are who Eric thinks you are, then what happened yesterday was... He searched for words. It was like watching someone insult a swordmaster who chose not to draw his blade. Marcus set down his sandwich and looked at both men. Let me be very clear. I'm a janitor. That's what I do, and that's what I am. Whatever else you think you see, that's in the past. Dead and buried. I chose this life deliberately because I wanted something simple, something honest, something that didn't require me to carry weapons or make decisions that get people killed. His voice was quiet but carried absolute finality. I would appreciate it if you respected that choice and let the past stay where it belongs. Eric studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Understood. But for what it's worth, if you ever need anything, you've got friends in security. Daniel's told me how you've helped people around here. The girl whose car battery died and you stayed late to jump it. The guy on the 10th floor whose wallet got stolen and you somehow tracked it down. You look out for people. So we look out for you. After they left, Marcus sat alone with the remainder of his lunch, appetite gone. The careful anonymity he'd constructed was developing cracks. People were looking at him differently, seeing past the uniform to something underneath. It was only a matter of time before someone looked deep enough to find the truth he'd buried. The afternoon brought its own complications. At 2:30 p.m., Marcus was cleaning the lobby restrooms when he heard his name over the building's PA system, something that had never happened in 3 years. Marcus Reed to the main security desk. Marcus Reed to the main security desk. He made his way upstairs to find Daniel waiting with an uncomfortable expression and a man in an expensive suit carrying a briefcase. Mr. Reed, the man said, extending a business card. I'm Roger Patterson, attorney for Hale Industries. I was hoping we could have a brief conversation. Marcus glanced at Daniel, who shrugged helplessly. Conference room 2 is open, Daniel offered. The conference room was smaller than the one where he'd talked with Catherine Hale, windowless and utilitarian. Roger Patterson settled into a chair and opened his briefcase with the precise movements of someone accustomed to high-stakes negotiations. Mr. Reed, I'll be direct. The company is prepared to offer you a settlement regarding yesterday's incident. $50,000 paid immediately in exchange for signing a non-disclosure agreement and a waiver of any future legal action. Marcus had expected something like this, but the speed still surprised him. That's a generous offer. It reflects our sincere regret over what occurred. Mr. Hale's behavior was inappropriate, and the company takes full responsibility. Does Mr. Hale take responsibility? Patterson's smile was practiced, meaningless. Mr. Hale is a very busy man, as I'm sure you understand. He's asked me to convey his personal regret and to assure you that he values all employees of Hale Industries. Has he asked you that, or is that what the legal department decided he should convey? The smile faltered slightly. I'm not sure I understand the distinction. The distinction is between genuine remorse and damage control. Marcus leaned back in his chair. Your offer is essentially buying my silence, making sure I don't talk to the media or file a lawsuit that would create bad publicity. I wouldn't phrase it quite that way. How would you phrase it? Patterson closed his briefcase with a soft click. Mr. Reed, I've been practicing corporate law for 23 years. I've seen situations like this play out many times. An employee feels wronged by an executive. The employee pursues legal action, believing they'll achieve justice. What actually happens is months of legal proceedings, public scrutiny of their private life, stress that affects their health and relationships, and even if they win, a settlement that's barely larger than what we're offering you right now, minus attorney's fees. So you're doing me a favor. I'm offering you a clean exit with substantial compensation and the ability to move forward with your life. That's not nothing. Marcus considered the offer seriously for the first time. $50,000 would be enough to cover nearly 2 years of living expenses. He could quit tomorrow, find another job somewhere quieter, somewhere without the weight of yesterday's humiliation following him through the halls. It was what any reasonable person would do. I need to think about it, he said finally. Patterson's eyebrows rose. Most people in your position would jump at this opportunity. I'm not most people. Clearly. Patterson stood, leaving a folder on the table. The offer is detailed in here, along with my contact information. I need an answer by Friday. After that, the offer expires and you'll have to pursue other options. After the lawyer left, Marcus sat alone with the folder, unopened. $50,000 to pretend yesterday never happened. To let Victor Hale buy his way out of consequences. To accept that money could erase dignity. He left the folder on the table and returned to work. At 4:00 p.m., while Marcus was emptying trash on the 23rd floor, the elevator doors opened and Victor Hale stepped out, flanked by 2 junior executives carrying tablets and file folders. He was mid-conversation, his voice carrying down the hallway. Don't care what the projections say. We're moving forward with the acquisition. Get me the finance team's updated models by tomorrow morning. The executives peeled off into different offices, leaving Victor momentarily alone in the corridor. He glanced up and saw Marcus, and for a brief instant something flickered across his face. Recognition, possibly embarrassment, quickly suppressed. You, Victor said, his tone careful. Marcus, right? Yes, sir. Victor walked closer, and Marcus noted the subtle changes from yesterday. The slightly defensive posture, the way his eyes didn't quite meet Marcus's directly, the forced casualness that suggested he'd been coached on this interaction. I understand Roger Patterson spoke with you this afternoon. He did. Good. Good. Victor shifted his weight, uncomfortable in a way Marcus had never seen him. Look, about yesterday, things got heated. I was dealing with multiple crises and I let stress affect my behavior. That wasn't professional. Marcus said nothing, just waited. The offer on the table is fair, Victor continued, his discomfort growing in the silence. More than fair, really. You'd be smart to take it. Mr. Hale, can I ask you something? Victor blinked, surprised. What? When you look at me, what do you see? The question seemed to throw him completely. What kind of question is that? A simple one. When you see me in my uniform with my cleaning cart, what goes through your mind? Victor's jaw tightened. I see an employee, someone who has a job to do, same as everyone else in this building. You see a floor scrubber, someone interchangeable, someone who doesn't matter. Marcus's voice remained calm, almost gentle. That's what you said yesterday. And I'm wondering if anything has changed or if the only thing that's different is that your behavior might cost you money and reputation. That's not... Victor stopped, struggling with words in a way that suggested this was unfamiliar territory. I said things I shouldn't have said. The offer is my way of making that right. Money doesn't make things right, Mr. Hale. It just makes them quiet. Victor's face hardened, the familiar arrogance returning like armor. You know what? I tried. I came up here personally, tried to smooth this over like a human being. But if you want to turn down $50,000 because of some moral superiority complex, that's your choice. Just understand, that offer has an expiration date. And people who make themselves problems tend to find that their employment has an expiration date too. Is that a threat? It's a reality check. You can take the money and move on, or you can make this difficult and discover that I have resources you can't begin to imagine. Victor turned to leave, then stopped. My lawyer will need your answer by Friday. Choose wisely. Marcus watched him stride back to the elevator, his posture already shifting back to the commanding presence of a man accustomed to getting his way. The brief moment of vulnerability, if it had even been real, was gone. For the first time since yesterday morning, Marcus felt something harden inside him. Not anger exactly, something colder, more calculated. The part of him that had planned operations and assessed enemies and understood that some battles needed to be fought not for personal satisfaction, but for principle. The rest of his shift passed in a blur of routine motion and racing thoughts. At 6 o'clock p.m., he signed out and left the building, but instead of heading to the subway, he walked to a small park 3 blocks away and sat on a bench, watching office workers stream past on their way to trains and buses and lives that continued outside the towers. His phone rang. Unknown number, different from yesterday's HR call. Marcus Reed? The voice was male, educated, carrying a trace of an accent Marcus couldn't quite place. Who's calling? My name is David Cho. I'm an investigative journalist with the Metropolitan Daily. I'm working on a story about workplace culture at major corporations, and I understand you recently had an incident with Victor Hale. Marcus felt his stomach drop. How did you get this number? I have sources. Listen, I'm not interested in causing you problems, but what happened to you? It's part of a larger pattern. I've been investigating Hale Industries for 6 months, collecting stories from current and former employees about hostile work environments, retaliation against complaints, systematic devaluation of lower-level workers. Your story could be the one that breaks this open. I'm not interested in being part of any story. I understand your hesitation, but think about it. How many other people has Victor Hale treated the way he treated you? How many are still being treated that way right now? You have a chance to change that, to hold power accountable. By making myself a public spectacle? By standing up. Look, I don't need an answer right now, but I'm going to send you some information, articles I've written, background on my investigation. Just read it. Think about whether you want to be part of holding people like Victor Hale responsible for their actions. Cho paused. My sources tell me you're not just a janitor, that you have a background that suggests you understand things like duty and service. This could be another kind of service. Your sources are wrong. Are they? Marcus Reed, age 62, 3 years at Hale Industries, no employment history prior to that showing up in standard databases. Which is interesting, don't you think? Like someone who might have had a career that doesn't appear in public records. The kind of career that might involve classified work. Marcus felt cold spread through his chest. Mr. Cho, I don't know what you think you found, but I'm asking you, as one human being to another, leave me alone. I'm not interested in being part of your investigation or your article or anything else. I just want to do my job and live my life quietly. Sometimes quiet isn't an option. Sometimes circumstances demand that we step up, whether we want to or not. Cho's voice softened. I'll send you the information anyway. No pressure. Just think about it. The line went dead. Marcus sat on the bench as evening settled over the city, streetlights flickering to life, the temperature dropping as autumn asserted itself. He thought about Victor Hale's threat, Catherine Hale's offer of support, the lawyer's settlement, and now a journalist sniffing around his past. The careful piece he'd constructed was collapsing, pieces falling away to reveal the foundation underneath. The man he'd been, the capabilities he'd tried to bury, the instincts that never truly disappeared. His phone buzzed with an email from David Cho. 6 attached documents, articles about workplace abuse, corporate culture, patterns of behavior at Hale Industries and similar companies. Marcus didn't open them. Not yet. Instead, he called Rosa. Marcus? What's wrong? You never call. Rosa, I need advice from someone who understands how the world actually works. Okay, what happened? He told her everything: the settlement offer, the conversation with Victor, the journalist, the pressure building from all sides. Rosa listened without interrupting, her silence carrying the weight of experience and wisdom earned through decades of navigating systems designed to diminish people like them. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Marcus, I'm going to tell you what my mother told me when I had to decide whether to report a manager who was harassing me, she said finally. She said, "You can't control what other people do. You can only control who you are when you go to sleep at night. Make sure that person is someone you can live with." What did you do? I reported him. He got transferred, not fired, and I got labeled a troublemaker. It cost me promotions, opportunities, respect from people who should have known better. But I sleep fine, Marcus, because I know I did the right thing, even though the system didn't reward it. I'm not sure what the right thing is here. Yes, you are. You're just afraid of what it might cost you. Her voice was gentle but firm. You're one of the best people I know. You help everyone, you never complain, you do your job with more dignity than most executives show in their corner offices. Whatever you were before you came here, I don't know and I don't need to know, but I know who you are now. And that person doesn't take $50,000 to stay quiet while a bully learns that money solves everything. After they hung up, Marcus sat in the gathering darkness, Rosa's words echoing in his mind. He thought about Captain Reed, the man who'd never backed down from a mission because it was difficult or dangerous. He thought about the values he'd tried to live by: duty, honor, service. He thought about the young mother on the subway that morning, the way she'd looked at him with gratitude for a simple kindness. He opened David Cho's email and began reading. The articles were meticulously researched, devastating in their accumulation of detail. Story after story of employees humiliated, careers destroyed, complaints buried, settlements paid quietly to make problems disappear. A pattern of behavior that went back years, enabled by wealth and power and a legal system that favored those who could afford the best lawyers. Victor Hale wasn't an isolated case. He was a symptom of something larger, more systematic, more destructive. Marcus read until the park was empty except for him and the homeless man sleeping on a bench across the path. Then he pulled out his phone and composed a careful email. "Mr. Cho, I'll talk to you, but I have conditions. We meet in person, not over the phone. I maintain approval over anything you write about me. And you agree that my background remains private. No digging into my past, no speculation about what I did before I came to Hale Industries. If you can agree to those terms, I'm willing to tell you what happened and why it matters." He hit send before he could second-guess himself. The walk to the subway felt different now, lighter somehow, as if he'd set down a weight he hadn't realized he was carrying. Tomorrow would bring consequences he couldn't predict. But tonight, Marcus Reed, Captain Reed, had made a decision that felt like returning to himself after a long absence. He slept better than he had in days, and when his alarm woke him at 5:15 a.m. Thursday morning, he rose with the sense that something had fundamentally shifted. Not just in his circumstances, but in who he was willing to be in the face of those circumstances. The subway ride was crowded again, but this time Marcus didn't mind the press of bodies, the collective struggle of people trying to reach another day. They were all fighting their own battles, some visible, most hidden. He was simply one among many, no better or worse, just another person trying to navigate a world that didn't always play fair. At Hale Industries, he changed into his uniform and began his rounds. But this time, when people looked at him with pity or curiosity or solidarity, he met their eyes and nodded, acknowledging the connection, accepting that his story had become something larger than personal grievance. At 9 a.m., his phone buzzed with a response from David Cho. "Agreed to all terms. Meet me at Cooper's Coffee, corner of 5th and 42nd, tomorrow at 7 o'clock p.m. And Marcus, thank you for trusting me with this." Marcus pocketed his phone and returned to work, feeling the weight of choice settle onto his shoulders like familiar equipment. He'd carried heavier burdens. Whatever came next, he would face it the way he'd faced everything else, with quiet competence and the unshakable conviction that some things mattered more than comfort or safety. The rest of Thursday passed in a strange state of heightened awareness, as if the building itself sensed that something was about to change, some balance about to shift. And through it all, Marcus Reed cleaned floors and emptied trash and helped whoever needed help, no different on the surface than he'd been for 3 years, but fundamentally transformed underneath where it counted most. Friday morning arrived with unseasonable warmth, the kind of October day that felt like summer's last defiant stand before winter claimed the city. Marcus stood on the subway platform at 5:40 a.m., watching a rat navigate the tracks with the confidence of someone who owned the place, and felt a strange kinship with the creature, both of them survivors in a world that wanted them invisible. His phone had been silent since David Cho's confirmation email yesterday, but Marcus knew the quiet wouldn't last. Roger Patterson's deadline expired today. By end of business, he'd need to give an answer about the settlement, and that answer would set everything else in motion. The building felt different when he arrived, or perhaps he felt different inside it. Marcus moved through his morning routine with the same precision as always, but underneath the familiar motions his mind was calculating angles, assessing risks, preparing for conflict the way he'd once prepared for missions. The instincts he'd buried were surfacing, muscle memory of a different kind of life reasserting itself. At 7:30 a.m., while Marcus was cleaning the executive washroom on the 16th floor, he heard voices in the adjacent corridor. Victor Hale and someone else, their conversation drifting through the ventilation system. "Getting out of control," the other voice said. A woman, older, with the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. The footage has been shared 40,000 times on social media. The narrative is writing itself, Victor, and it's not favorable. It's one incident blown out of proportion by people who've never built anything in their lives. It's a pattern that's finally getting attention. I've had 3 board members call me this week, all asking variations of the same question. Is this who we are as a company? Is this what Hale Industries stands for? What did you tell them? I told them we're handling it. That you've apologized, that we've made a generous settlement offer, that we're taking steps to ensure nothing like this happens again. Who the hell are you to speak for me? Victor's voice rose. I don't report to you, Mother. Dad left me in charge of this company, not you. There was a pause, heavy with decades of family dynamics Marcus couldn't begin to understand. When the woman spoke again, her voice carried the cold precision of someone delivering a verdict. Your father left you in charge because he believed you had the character to lead with integrity. Lately, I've begun to question his judgment. The son I raised would never have humiliated another human being for the crime of a spilled bucket. The son you raised? You mean the son you barely noticed while you were too busy with charity boards and society functions? Don't lecture me about character when you outsourced my entire childhood to nannies and boarding schools. That's unfair, and you know it. But this isn't about our relationship, Victor. This is about the company my husband built and the legacy you're destroying with your arrogance. Their voices faded as they moved away. Marcus stood motionless, processing what he'd overheard. Victor Hale had a mother who still wielded influence, who cared about reputation and legacy, who might be a lever for change if properly engaged. The dynamics were more complicated than he'd realized. He finished cleaning and moved to the next floor, but at 8:15 a.m. his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mr. Reed, this is Margaret Hale. I would very much like to speak with you before you make any decisions about my son's settlement offer. Please call me at your earliest convenience. The number was attached. Marcus stared at the message, understanding that the game had just shifted again. Margaret Hale reaching out directly meant she saw him as more than a problem to be managed with money. She saw him as someone whose choices mattered, whose story could shape outcomes. He waited until his morning break, then called from the relative privacy of the basement supply room. Mr. Reed. Margaret Hale's voice was warmer than he expected, cultured but not artificial. Thank you for calling back. I imagine you're wondering how I got your number. The thought crossed my mind. I'm on the board of directors. I have access to employee records. She paused. I also have access to the security footage from Tuesday morning. I've watched it 11 times, trying to understand how my son became someone capable of such cruelty. Mrs. Hale, I appreciate your concern, but please, let me finish. I'm not calling to make excuses for Victor or to pressure you about the settlement. I'm calling because I need you to understand something. My husband, Victor Sr., built this company on certain principles. He believed that how you treat people when they can't help you reveals your true character. He believed that real leadership meant serving everyone in the organization, not just the shareholders and executives. Her voice caught slightly. He died 3 years ago, and I've watched his son slowly abandon everything he taught us. I'm sorry for your loss, Mrs. Hale. Are you? That's kind of you, but I suspect you're mostly wondering why I'm telling you this. She took a breath. I'm telling you because I've done some research on you, Mr. Reed, or tried to. Your employment history before Hale Industries is remarkably sparse. A few odd jobs, nothing substantial, and then a gap of several decades with no public records at all. Marcus felt his grip tighten on the phone. I'm not sure what that has to do with anything. It tells me you're someone with secrets, which means you're someone who values privacy. It also tells me you chose to work as a janitor deliberately, not out of desperation or lack of options. People don't make that choice without reason. Her voice softened. I think you're someone who walked away from something complicated and found peace in simplicity. And my son destroyed that peace because he's forgotten how to see people as anything other than functions of his empire. Marcus said nothing, surprised by her insight. Whatever you decide about the settlement, I want you to know something, Margaret continued. If you choose to fight this, publicly, legally, however you see fit, you'll have support from inside the family. Catherine has already told me she's prepared to testify on your behalf, if it comes to that. And I will use every share of stock I control, every relationship I've built over 40 years in this business, to ensure that accountability happens. Why would you do that? He's your son. Because he's my son. Because if I don't help him face consequences now, he'll continue down this path until he destroys himself and everything his father built. Sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to enable destruction. She paused. But I won't lie to you, Mr. Reed. Fighting Victor will be brutal. He has resources, lawyers, connections. He'll make your life difficult in ways you can't anticipate. The settlement offer is real, and taking it would be the sensible choice for most people. But you don't think I'm most people. I think you're someone who understands that some things matter more than money or comfort. I could be wrong. Maybe you'll take the settlement and I'll have misjudged you. Either way, I wanted you to have all the information before you decide. After the call ended, Marcus sat in the supply room surrounded by industrial cleaners and paper products, feeling the weight of other people's expectations pressing down on him. Margaret Hale, Catherine Hale, Rosa, David Cho, even Eric and Daniel. Everyone seemed to think he was someone worth believing in, someone capable of standing up to power and winning. The question was whether they were right, or whether they were projecting their own hopes onto a 62-year-old janitor who just wanted to be left alone. At noon, Marcus was eating lunch in the basement cafeteria when Jennifer Walsh from HR appeared, looking uncomfortable and purposeful. Mr. Reed, do you have a moment? Of course. She sat down across from him, glancing around to ensure they had relative privacy. I need to tell you something off the record. The settlement deadline is today at 5 o'clock p.m., but there's pressure from multiple directions to extend it. Roger Patterson wants more time to convince you to take the money. Catherine Hale is arguing that we should withdraw the offer entirely and let you pursue whatever action you choose. And Victor is... She stopped, choosing words carefully. Victor is escalating. He's talking about finding reasons to terminate your employment. On what grounds? He doesn't need grounds in New York. Employment is at will unless you have a contract, which you don't. He could fire you today and technically he'd be within his rights, though it would be obvious retaliation. Marcus took a bite of his sandwich, processing. You're risking your job by telling me this. Probably, but I didn't go into HR to help powerful people abuse their positions. I went into it because I believed companies could be better, fairer, more humane. She met his eyes directly. What happened to you was wrong. What's happening now? The legal maneuvering, the attempts to buy your silence. It's all wrong. Someone needs to say that out loud. What would you do if you were me? Jennifer smiled sadly. I'd probably take the money and run, because I have student loans and rent and a life that doesn't leave room for principled poverty. But I'm not you. I don't have whatever it is that makes you different from everyone else in this building. I'm not different. I'm just a janitor who spilled a bucket of water. No, you're not. I don't know what you are exactly, but you're not just a janitor. She stood up. The offer expires at 5 p.m. After that, things are going to get messy. Make sure you're ready for what comes next. The afternoon stretched long and tense. Marcus moved through his duties with automatic precision while his mind worked through scenarios and possibilities. At 3:30 p.m., his phone rang again. David Cho. Marcus, I need to give you a heads up. I just got word that Hale Industries is preparing a preemptive strike. They're planning to release a statement painting you as a disgruntled employee with a history of workplace issues trying to extort money from the company. That's completely false. Of course it's false, but they have PR firms and lawyers who are very good at manufacturing narratives. They're going to leak information to friendly media outlets, probably hit you from multiple directions at once. Cho paused. Unless we get ahead of it, I can have my article ready to publish by tomorrow morning. It would tell your side of the story first, frame the narrative before they can control it. I haven't even met with you yet. Our meeting isn't until tonight. I know, but circumstances are changing faster than expected. If we wait, we lose the initiative. His voice took on urgency. Marcus, I've spent 6 months documenting how Hale Industries treats people. This isn't just about you anymore. This is about every employee who's been bullied, diminished, or thrown away by powerful people who face no consequences. Your story can change that. Marcus looked around the empty corridor where he stood, the pristine floors he'd cleaned 1,000 times, the building that had been his refuge and was now becoming his battlefield. I need to think. You have until 5 p.m. After that, the settlement expires and you'll be fully exposed with no protection. Please, trust me. Let me help you. At 4:15 p.m., Marcus was cleaning the 20th floor conference rooms when he heard rapid footsteps behind him. He turned to find Catherine Hale, her expression urgent. I've been looking all over for you, she said. Victor knows you're going to turn down the settlement. I don't know how he knows, but he does. He's meeting with the executive team right now, planning how to discredit you before you can go public. How did you, I have allies in the company who keep me informed. The point is, you need to be prepared. My brother is about to unleash everything he has against you. She handed him a thumb drive. This contains documentation of every settlement Hale Industries has paid out in the last 5 years. Harassment cases, discrimination claims, wrongful terminations, all of it buried under NDAs and confidential agreements. If you're going to fight, you need ammunition. Marcus stared at the small device. You're giving me confidential company information. I'm giving you the truth. What you do with it is your choice. She met his eyes. My father used to say that the measure of a company is how it treats its most vulnerable employees. By that standard, we've failed. Someone needs to hold us accountable, and I can't do it from inside. I'm too compromised, too much a part of the system. But you're outside it. You can force change in ways I never could. Your brother's going to know this came from you. Let him. I'm tired of being complicit. She turned to leave, then stopped. One more thing. There's going to be an emergency board meeting Monday morning. Victor called it to discuss personnel issues, but we all know it's about you. He's going to push for your immediate termination and a company-wide policy of aggressive response to any employee who challenges executive authority. If you're going to act, do it before Monday. After that meeting, the whole organization will be mobilized against you. At 4:45 p.m., Marcus stood in the basement locker room, staring at his reflection in the mirror above the sinks. The face looking back was weathered, lined, unremarkable. The face of someone who blended into the background of other people's important lives. But the eyes told a different story. They were the eyes of Captain Marcus Reed, the man who'd led teams into impossible situations and brought them home. The tactical thinker who'd never backed down from a mission that mattered. He pulled out his phone and called David Cho. I'm in, Marcus said without preamble. Publish the article. Tell the truth about what happened and why it matters. But you need to understand something. I'm not doing this for revenge or money or justice. I'm doing it because someone has to, and apparently that someone is me. Marcus, you won't regret this. I already regret it, but I'm doing it anyway. He paused. One condition. You use the documentation Catherine Hale gave me, but you don't reveal her as the source. She's trying to fix this from inside, and she can't do that if her brother knows she's working against him. Agreed. I'll need the files tonight. Can you still make our 7 p.m. meeting? I'll be there. At 4:58 p.m., Marcus called Roger Patterson. Mr. Reed, I'm glad you called. Have you made a decision about the settlement? I have. The answer is no. Silence on the other end, longer than Marcus expected. Mr. Reed, I strongly advise you to reconsider. Turning down this offer is a decision you'll likely regret. I've made worse decisions and survived them. This one I can live with. Very well, I'll inform Mr. Hale of your choice. But don't say you weren't warned about the consequences. Patterson's voice hardened. You're about to discover what it means to make an enemy of a very powerful man. I've faced powerful enemies before, Mr. Patterson. Your client doesn't frighten me. Marcus ended the call and immediately texted David Cho the files from Catherine's thumb drive. Then he changed out of his uniform for the last time, because he knew, with the certainty of someone who'd read the battlefield correctly, that he wouldn't be coming back to Hale Industries as an employee. That chapter of his life was closing, whether he wanted it to or not. He left through the basement exit at 5:30 p.m., nodding to Daniel at the security desk. Heading out early? Daniel asked. Got a meeting. Might not be back on Monday. Daniel studied his face, reading something there. This is it, isn't it? Whatever you've been building toward. I haven't been building toward anything, just responding to what life put in front of me. Marcus, Daniel came around the desk, lowering his voice. I did some checking, called in a favor with a friend who works DoD contract security. Gave him your name, your age, asked if there was any reason your employment history might have gaps. Marcus felt ice in his veins. Daniel, he wouldn't tell me anything specific. Said if there was something there, it was above his clearance level. But he did say one thing before he hung up. He said, if that's the Marcus Reed I think it is, then someone just made a very serious mistake messing with him. Daniel extended his hand. Whatever happens next, you've got people here who have your back. Marcus shook his hand, recognizing the bond forming, not based on what he'd done before, but on who he'd been during 3 years of cleaning floors and helping people and maintaining dignity in a place designed to strip it away. The coffee shop David Cho had chosen was deliberately anonymous, a chain location that could have been anywhere in America. Marcus arrived at 6:45 p.m. and ordered black coffee, taking a booth in the back where he could watch both entrances. Old habits surfacing again, tactical awareness he'd thought he'd left behind. Cho arrived at precisely 7:12 p.m., younger than Marcus expected, maybe 35, with the intense energy of someone who believed journalism could change things. He slid into the booth carrying a laptop bag and a digital recorder. Marcus Reed, thank you for trusting me with this. Haven't decided if I trust you yet. That depends on what you do with what I tell you. Cho smiled. Fair enough. He pulled out a notepad and pen, old school despite the technology at his disposal. Before we start, I want to be clear about something. I've received the files you sent. They're explosive, proof of a pattern of abuse and cover-up at Hale Industries going back years. But I want to make sure I have your story right first, because that's what will make people care about the larger pattern. For the next 2 hours, Marcus walked Cho through everything. The spilled bucket, Victor's public humiliation, the settlement offer, the threats, the pressure from all sides. He spoke plainly, without emotion, laying out facts the way he'd once delivered mission briefings. Cho listened without interrupting, taking notes in swift shorthand. When Marcus finished, the journalist sat back and studied him. There's something you're not telling me. Something about who you were before you started working at Hale Industries. That's not part of our agreement. I know. And I'll respect that. But I need you to understand something. When this article publishes tomorrow, people are going to dig into your background. Victor Hale will hire investigators. Other media outlets will try to find angles I missed. The gaps in your public history will raise questions you might not want to answer. Then they'll raise questions. I'm not putting my previous life into your article or anyone else's. Cho nodded slowly. Okay, but off the record, just for my own understanding, are you someone who can handle what's coming? Because Victor Hale is going to come at you with everything he has. Legal threats, character assassination, financial pressure. It's going to be brutal. Marcus met his eyes directly. Mr. Cho, I've survived things that would give you nightmares. I've made decisions that determined whether people lived or died. I've operated in situations where failure meant consequences you can't imagine. Victor Hale is a rich man who's never faced real adversity in his life. Trust me when I say, I can handle him. Something in Marcus's voice, in the absolute certainty of his words, made Cho lean back and nod. I believe you. Which means tomorrow is going to be very interesting. They parted at 9:15 p.m. with an agreement that the article would publish at 6 o'clock a.m. Saturday morning, giving it maximum visibility before Hale Industries could mount a coordinated response. Marcus walked to the subway, feeling lighter than he had in days, as if he'd finally stopped running from something and turned to face it instead. But when he emerged at his stop in Queens, he found a man waiting near the station entrance. Expensive suit, professional demeanor, holding an envelope. Marcus Reed? Who's asking? I'm a process server. You've been served with a cease and desist order from Hale Industries' legal team. He handed Marcus the envelope. Have a good evening. Marcus opened it under the streetlight, reading the legal language that boiled down to a simple message. Talk to the media and we'll destroy you in court. He folded the papers carefully and continued walking home, unbothered. They were threatening legal action over something he'd already done, which meant they were reacting, not leading. They'd lost the initiative. At home, Marcus made dinner and ate without tasting it, his mind already 3 moves ahead. The article would publish in 9 hours. Victor Hale would wake up Saturday morning to find his cruelty exposed to the world. The company would scramble to respond. The story would spread. And Marcus would need to be ready for whatever came next. He pulled the lockbox from his closet and opened it, looking at the medals and photographs and papers that documented a life he'd tried to leave behind. Captain Marcus Reed, the man who'd led missions in places that didn't appear on maps, who'd made calls that saved lives and ended others, who'd earned respect through competence and courage rather than money or position. Maybe that man had never really gone away. Maybe he'd just been waiting for a mission that mattered. Marcus slept fitfully, dreams mixing memory and present, past operations bleeding into current battles. When his phone alarm rang at 5:30 a.m. Saturday morning, he was already awake, lying in the gray dawn light and thinking about consequences. At 6:03 a.m., David Cho sent a text. Article is live. God help us both. Marcus opened his laptop and navigated to the Metropolitan Daily's website. The headline took up half the screen, Inside Hale Industries, a culture of cruelty from the top down. The article was comprehensive, devastating, built around Marcus's story, but expanding to show the pattern Catherine's files had revealed. Dozens of cases, millions in settlements, years of abuse swept under expensive carpets, and at the center of it all, Victor Hale. His words to Marcus quoted in full, his pattern of behavior documented with precision. By 6:30 a.m., the story had been shared 2,000 times. By 7 o'clock a.m., other news outlets were picking it up, adding their own commentary. By 8 o'clock a.m., Victor Hale was trending on social media, and not in a way that would make shareholders happy. Marcus's phone started ringing at 7:45 a.m. Reporters, news shows, radio programs, all wanting interviews. He ignored them all, except one call from a number he recognized. Marcus, it's Catherine Hale. I just read the article. It's perfect. Everything we needed to force accountability. She paused. But you need to know, Victor is losing his mind. He's called an emergency board meeting for this afternoon instead of Monday. He's going to demand your prosecution for theft of company documents, corporate espionage, whatever charges his lawyers can dream up. Let him try. I didn't steal anything. Someone with authorized access provided me with information, and I gave it to a journalist. That's protected activity. Maybe legally, but Victor doesn't care about legal technicalities right now. He cares about destroying you. Her voice carried genuine concern. Please be careful. My brother is dangerous when he's cornered. Catherine, I've dealt with dangerous people in dangerous places. Your brother is a CEO having a bad morning. I'll be fine. But even as he said it, Marcus understood that something had fundamentally shifted. He'd crossed a line, engaged in battle with an enemy who had resources and ruthlessness, and nothing left to lose. The careful peace he'd built over 3 years was gone, burned away in the harsh light of truth-telling and consequence. The question now wasn't whether he could win. It was what winning would cost, and whether the price was worth paying. Marcus's phone rang continuously through Saturday morning, each call a reporter or producer or blogger wanting his story, his voice, his face for their particular platform. He ignored them all and instead did something he hadn't done in months. He went for a run through his Queens neighborhood, pushing his aging body through 5 miles while his mind worked through strategy and contingency. The physical exertion helped clear his thoughts, reminded him of dawn training runs in another life, when preparation meant the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. By the time he returned to his apartment, sweat-soaked and breathing hard, he'd identified the most likely paths Victor Hale would take and how to counter each one. At 10:30 a.m., his phone rang with a number he didn't recognize, but a New York area code he did, the kind used by law firms with marble lobbies and partners who billed $1,000 an hour. Mr. Reed, my name is Thomas Blackwell. I'm senior partner at Morrison Blackwell and Associates. I represent several individuals who've had similar experiences at Hale Industries. We'd very much like to discuss representing you in potential legal action against the company. Marcus sat down at his small kitchen table, suddenly aware that this moment would determine the next phase of everything. Mr. Blackwell, I appreciate the call, but I'm not interested in a lawsuit. Mr. Reed, please hear me out. Based on what's been reported, you have an exceptionally strong case for workplace harassment, hostile work environment, and retaliation. We're talking about potential damages in the 7-figure range, possibly 8 if we can prove systemic patterns of abuse. I don't want Victor Hale's money. Then what do you want? Blackwell's voice shifted, becoming less salesman and more strategist. Because from where I'm sitting, you've just declared war on a billionaire who's already mobilizing every resource he has to crush you. If you're not going to fight back with legal action, what exactly is your plan? It was a fair question, one Marcus had been asking himself since dawn. I want accountability. Real accountability. Not a settlement that lets him buy his way out of consequences. I want him to face the people he's hurt, to understand what he's done, to change how he operates. Blackwell was silent for a long moment. Mr. Reed, I've been practicing law for 30 years. I've never seen accountability happen without legal pressure. Rich men don't voluntarily reform themselves. Maybe this one will. And if he doesn't? If he destroys your reputation, your finances, your peace of mind, and nothing changes except that you're bankrupt and broken? Then at least I'll know I tried. After Blackwell hung up, sounding both frustrated and impressed, Marcus made coffee and settled in to read the response to David Cho's article. The comment sections were predictably divided, half outraged at Victor Hale's behavior, half convinced Marcus was a con artist looking for a payday. But what struck him was the sheer volume of personal stories emerging in the wake of the article. Hundreds of people sharing their own experiences with workplace bullying, with powerful people who faced no consequences, with the daily humiliation of being treated as less than human by those who should have known better. He was reading through these testimonials when someone knocked on his door. Marcus approached cautiously, years of tactical training making him hyper-aware of threats, and looked through the peephole to see Rosa standing in the hallway holding a covered dish. He opened the door. "Rosa, what are you doing here?" "I saw the news. I figured you might not be eating properly." She pushed past him into the apartment, immediately assessing his Spartan living space with the keen eye of someone who'd cleaned enough homes to understand what absence revealed. "Just as I thought. You live like a monk." "I have everything I need." "You have nothing you need." She set the dish on his counter and uncovered it, releasing the scent of her famous chicken and rice. "When did you last eat something that didn't come from a can or a microwave?" "Rosa, sit. Eat, and tell me what the hell you're doing taking on a billionaire with no lawyer, no plan, and apparently no sense of self-preservation." Marcus sat, suddenly grateful for her presence, for the way she cut through his isolation like someone who'd earned the right to care. "I'm not taking him on. I'm just refusing to be silent about what happened." "That's the same thing, and you know it." Rosa pulled out a chair and sat across from him, studying his face with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. 3 years I've worked with you. 3 years I've watched you help everyone in that building, never asking for anything, never causing trouble, just doing your work with more dignity than most people bring to their whole lives. And now you've thrown it all away to fight someone who has infinite resources and zero conscience. Not thrown away, just redirected. Toward what? What's the end game here, Marcus? He took a bite of her chicken, giving himself time to formulate an answer. You remember what you told me earlier this week? About your mother's advice? About making sure you're someone you can live with when you go to sleep at night? Of course. I tried being someone who stayed quiet, who accepted disrespect and moved on, who told himself that words don't matter and pride is expensive. Marcus set down his fork. But I couldn't sleep, Rosa. For the first time in 3 years, I couldn't sleep. Because I kept hearing his voice telling me I'm nothing, that I'll always be nothing, that my whole existence is worth less than his ruined shoes. And I realized, if I let that stand, if I take his money and disappear, then he's right. I am nothing, just another person who can be bought. Rosa's eyes glistened. You were never nothing, not to the people who actually know you. Maybe not, but I need to not be nothing to myself. He pushed the plate aside and leaned forward. When I was younger, I did things that mattered, things I can't talk about, but things that made a difference in ways most people will never know. And then I walked away from that life because I was tired, because I wanted peace, because I'd earned the right to be invisible. But maybe peace isn't the same as surrender. Maybe there's something between constant warfare and total retreat. And you think fighting Victor Hale is that something? I think not fighting him would be the same as accepting that power means you can treat people however you want. I've spent too many years opposing that principle to just abandon it now because it's personally inconvenient. Rosa reached across the table and took his hand, her grip strong from decades of hard work. Then fight him. But don't fight him alone. You have people who care about you, who believe in you, who want to help. Let us. They sat in silence for a moment, hands clasped across the table, two people who'd found unexpected friendship in the margins of someone else's empire. Then Rosa's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and her expression changed. It's from Danny in security. He says the board meeting at Hale Industries just ended early. Victor stormed out and there are rumors. She read further, her eyes widening. Marcus, they're saying the board demanded his resignation. Marcus felt something shift in his chest, a sensation like tectonic plates moving beneath the surface. That can't be right. Boards don't fire CEOs over one incident of bad behavior. It's not one incident. The article showed it's dozens, maybe hundreds. And apparently several major investors called emergency meetings with board members this morning, threatening to dump their stock if Hale Industries doesn't take decisive action. Rosa looked up from her phone. You didn't just embarrass Victor Hale. You exposed a liability that threatens the entire company's valuation. Before Marcus could respond, his own phone rang. Catherine Hale. Marcus, where are you? Home. What's happening? The board met for 4 hours. My mother led the charge. She presented evidence that Victor's behavior has created massive legal and financial exposure for the company. Combined with the public relations disaster from the article, the institutional investors demanded action. Catherine's voice carried both triumph and sadness. They've given Victor a choice: resign as CEO effective immediately, or face a formal vote of no confidence that would end the same way but destroy what's left of his reputation. What did he choose? He's still deciding, but either way he's done. Mother is being installed as interim CEO until they can recruit someone from outside the family. She paused. Marcus, you did this. You stood up to him, refused his money, told the truth, and now he's facing actual consequences for the first time in his privileged life. Marcus felt no satisfaction, only a strange emptiness. I didn't do it to destroy him. I know, you did it because it was right. But the result is the same. Catherine's voice softened. There's going to be a reckoning now. A real one. Mother's already announced a complete review of company culture, third-party investigations into every settlement over the past decade, and a new policy of zero tolerance for executive misconduct. The place is going to transform. After hanging up, Marcus sat staring at his phone, trying to process the magnitude of what had happened. In less than a week, he'd gone from invisible janitor to the catalyst for corporate upheaval at a multi-billion-dollar company. It felt surreal, disconnected from the person he understood himself to be. You okay? Rosa asked quietly. I don't know. I expected a fight. I prepared for legal battles, character assassination, years of grinding resistance. I didn't expect... He gestured vaguely. This. You expected him to be stronger than he was. But bullies usually are weak underneath. That's why they need power to feel important. Rosa stood and began packing up the leftovers. The question is what you do now. You can't go back to being invisible after this. She was right, of course. Whatever happened next, Marcus Reed, the anonymous janitor, was gone forever, replaced by someone whose story had entered the public consciousness, whose choices had rippled outward in ways he couldn't have predicted. The afternoon brought a flood of new developments. David Cho called to say his newspaper had been contacted by 17 other Hale Industries employees willing to share their stories. A legal aid organization offered pro bono representation if Victor Hale attempted any retaliation. 3 news networks requested interviews. A publisher wanted to discuss a book deal. Marcus turned down everything except one call from Jennifer Walsh. Mr. Reed, I'm calling in my official capacity as HR director, but please understand this is the strangest call I've ever made. She took a breath. Mrs. Hale has asked me to extend an invitation for you to return to Hale Industries. Not as a janitor. She's offering you a position as employee advocate, reporting directly to her office, with full authority to investigate complaints and recommend disciplinary action regardless of rank. Marcus almost laughed. You're offering me a job after I just destroyed your CEO? Former CEO as of 2 hours ago. Victor resigned rather than face the board vote. Jennifer's voice carried something like wonder. Mrs. Hale is serious about reform, Marcus. She wants you as part of it because you've demonstrated the kind of integrity and courage she wants to define the company going forward. The salary would be competitive with mid-level executive positions, full benefits, and guaranteed protection from retaliation. Ms. Walsh, I appreciate the offer, but I don't think I'm the right person for that role. Why not? You've already proven you're willing to stand up to power. You understand what it's like to be on the bottom of the hierarchy. You have moral authority that nobody else in the organization can claim. Exactly. I have moral authority because I was outside the power structure. The moment I accept an executive position, I become part of what I was fighting against. People won't trust me the same way. Marcus moved to his window, looking out at the ordinary street below. Real change has to come from inside, from people who've been there all along and finally decide to demand better. I can't do that for them. Then what will you do? It was the second time someone had asked him that question today, and Marcus still didn't have a good answer. I honestly don't know, but I know it's not going back to Hale Industries in any capacity. That evening, as the sun set over Queens and streetlights flickered to life, Marcus sat on his small balcony and thought about trajectories. A week ago, his trajectory had been simple. Work his shift, help people where he could, live quietly, ask for nothing. Now that path had exploded into 1,000 fragments, and he had no map for reassembling them into something coherent. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mr. Reed, this is Victor Hale. I need to speak with you. Please call me at this number. Marcus stared at the message for a full minute before dialing. Reed. Victor's voice was different, stripped of its usual command, raw in a way that suggested recent tears or rage, or both. I suppose you're satisfied now. No, actually, I'm not. Don't give me that noble warrior bullshit. You wanted to destroy me and you succeeded. My company, my reputation, my legacy, all of it gone because you couldn't handle a few harsh words. Mr. Hale, I didn't destroy anything. I just told the truth about what happened. If that truth destroyed you, maybe you should consider what that means about the foundation you were standing on. Victor laughed, bitter and sharp. You sound like my mother, like my sister, like every bleeding heart who thinks compassion is a business strategy. You have no idea what it takes to run a company this size, to make decisions that affect thousands of jobs, to balance shareholder demands and market pressures and regulatory requirements. Sometimes you have to be hard. Sometimes you have to prioritize results over feelings. There's a difference between being hard and being cruel. You crossed that line. Did I? Or did I just say out loud what everyone in that building already thinks? That some jobs matter more than others? That some people contribute more value? That hierarchy exists for a reason? Victor's voice rose. You were a janitor, Reed. A floor scrubber. That's not an insult. It's a job description. And I'm sorry if acknowledging that reality hurt your precious feelings, but it doesn't change the fact that what you did was worth less to the company than what I did. Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest, the realization that Victor Hale still didn't understand, still couldn't see past his own distorted worldview to grasp the fundamental truth. You're right that different jobs have different functions. What you're wrong about is thinking that makes some people worth more than others as human beings. I cleaned your floors so you could walk to meetings without seeing dirt. That's a service, Mr. Hale. One you relied on every day without thinking about it, because people like me made your world work seamlessly enough that you never had to notice us. So what, you want gratitude? Recognition? A trophy for mopping floors? I want you to understand that the person who cleans your office has a life that matters just as much as yours, has dreams, struggles, dignity, value. I want you to see that power doesn't make you superior. It just makes you responsible for how you treat people who have less of it. Marcus paused. But I don't think you can see that, can you? Even now, after everything, you still think the problem is that I'm too sensitive, not that you're too cruel. Silence on the other end, stretching long enough that Marcus thought Victor had hung up. Then, quietly, almost broken, I called to apologize, to try to make this right somehow. But I don't think you'd accept anything I said. Probably not, because apologies only mean something when they come from understanding, not from consequences. You're sorry you got caught, sorry you faced accountability, sorry your career is over. But I don't think you're sorry for what you actually did to me. Then we have nothing more to discuss. Victor's voice hardened again, retreating into the armor of arrogance. Enjoy your moment of victory, Reed. But understand this. You haven't changed anything that matters. Corporate culture will stay the same because human nature stays the same. Someone else will replace me and make the same decisions I made, because those are the decisions that keep companies profitable. Your little revolution ends the moment the news cycle moves on. Maybe. Or maybe watching you fall will make the next person think twice. Maybe knowing that actions have consequences, even for billionaires, will shift something in how people with power see their responsibilities. Marcus stood, ready to end this conversation. Either way, I did what I could. That has to be enough. It won't be. Because people like you, people who think they can fight the system and win, you're fooling yourselves. The system is bigger than any individual. It grinds idealists into dust and moves on. Victor's laugh was hollow. But good luck with your crusade. I'm sure it'll keep you warm when you're sleeping under bridges because no company will ever hire you again. The call ended. Marcus set his phone down and looked out at his neighborhood, at working families coming home from their jobs, at teenagers playing basketball under streetlights, at the ordinary machinery of life continuing regardless of corporate drama or billionaire falls from grace. Victor was probably right that corporate culture wouldn't fundamentally change because one CEO resigned. Systems were resilient, self-perpetuating, designed to resist transformation. But Marcus had learned long ago in very different circumstances that you didn't fight battles because you knew you'd win. You fought them because they needed to be fought, because standing aside was its own form of surrender. Sunday morning brought unexpected visitors. Marcus was making breakfast when his doorbell rang at 8:00 a.m., early for a weekend, late for his usual schedule. Through the peephole, he saw Daniel and Eric, both in civilian clothes, both carrying bags from a local diner. "We brought reinforcements," Daniel announced when Marcus opened the door. "Figured you might need some company." They settled around his small kitchen table, and for an hour they ate and talked about everything except the situation that had brought them together. Sports, families, neighborhoods, the small details of ordinary lives. It was exactly what Marcus needed: normalcy, connection, the reminder that he was more than the controversy swirling around him. But eventually, as the coffee ran low and the conversation slowed, Eric shifted the tone. "I need to tell you something. Word's gotten around the security community about what happened. A lot of guys in private security, executive protection, that world. We're talking about it, about how a janitor stood up to a billionaire and won. I didn't win. I just didn't lose as badly as I could have. That's more than most people manage." Eric leaned forward. "The reason I'm bringing this up is there are opportunities out there for someone with your profile now. Security consulting firms that would value your integrity. Organizations looking for people who understand both tactical operations and ethical constraints." He paused meaningfully. "I put out some feelers. Made some calls to contacts who knew better than to ask too many questions about your background. There's interest, Marcus. Real interest from serious people. Marcus absorbed this, recognizing the implicit acknowledgement that his cover story had completely failed, that people in certain communities had identified him as something more than a janitor. I appreciate that, Eric, but I'm not looking to go back into that world. Then what world are you looking to go into? Because from where I'm sitting, you've just blown up your quiet retirement plan. Daniel spoke gently but firmly. You can't unring this bell, Marcus. You're public now. Famous, at least for the 15 minutes the internet grants people. You need to think about what comes next. They were right, of course. The comfortable anonymity he'd built was destroyed, replaced by scrutiny and attention and expectations he'd never wanted. But what surprised Marcus was that underneath the discomfort, he felt something else, a sense of purpose stirring, the recognition that maybe his time as Captain Reed had given him tools that the world still needed, just in different contexts. I need time to think, he said finally, about what matters to me now, about how I want to spend whatever years I have left, about whether fighting for accountability and dignity and basic human decency in corporate spaces is actually a thing I'm equipped to do. It's absolutely a thing you're equipped to do, Eric said. The question is whether it's a thing you want to do. After they left, Marcus spent the rest of Sunday in deliberate isolation, phone off, door locked, just him and his thoughts and the weight of choice. He did laundry, cleaned his already clean apartment, read 3 chapters of his Grant biography, cooked a simple dinner, all the routines of a life that no longer quite fit. Monday morning arrived with the sharp clarity of a pivot point. Marcus woke at 5:15 a.m. out of habit, started to dress in clothes appropriate for a shift that no longer existed, then stopped and sat on the edge of his bed, understanding that he was standing at a crossroads with no clear signs. His phone, turned back on, immediately flooded with notifications. More interview requests, more legal offers, more people wanting pieces of the story he'd inadvertently become central to. But one message stood out, from Margaret Hale, marked urgent. Mr. Reed, the board meeting this morning will include a formal presentation about company reforms. I would very much appreciate if you could attend as my guest. No pressure to speak, no expectations beyond your presence. But I think it would mean something to the employees to see you there, to understand that real change is possible. Please consider it. Marcus read the message 3 times, understanding what she was really asking. She wanted him as a symbol, proof that someone from the bottom of the hierarchy could challenge the top and survive. She wanted him to validate the reforms by his mere presence, to give employees hope that speaking up wouldn't always end in retaliation. He wanted to refuse, wanted to stay in his apartment and let the world spin without him, wanted to return to the invisibility he'd cultivated so carefully. But he thought about Rosa working the 3rd floor, about the young woman who'd apologized for not speaking up, about Daniel and Eric and Jennifer Walsh and everyone else who'd shown him that even in systems designed to crush resistance, there were always people trying to do better. They deserved to know that standing up wasn't always suicide. At 8:30 a.m., Marcus stood outside Hale Industries in his one good suit, a relic from his retirement ceremony 7 years ago that still fit reasonably well. The building looked different from this angle, not as a place he worked, but as a monument to everything he'd challenged. The morning crowd flowed around him, employees heading to their jobs, most unaware that their company had been transformed over a single weekend. Margaret Hale was waiting in the lobby, elegant in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Marcus's entire wardrobe. She extended her hand and he shook it, noting the firmness of her grip, the directness of her gaze. "Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would." "I wasn't sure either, but Rosa told me I'd regret it if I didn't." Margaret smiled. "Rosa Martinez, 3rd floor housekeeping. I made it a point to learn the names of everyone your article mentioned as supporters. She's a remarkable woman." "She is." They rode the elevator to the executive floor in silence, Marcus acutely aware of the stares from other passengers, the whispered recognition, the cell phone cameras that probably couldn't capture clear images, but were trying anyway. He'd become something he never wanted to be, notable, known, unable to blend into the background. The boardroom was impressive in a way that Marcus supposed it needed to be. All dark wood and leather chairs, and a view of Manhattan that reminded everyone present of the stakes involved. 23 people were arranged around the massive table: board members, senior executives, legal counsel. They all turned when Margaret entered with Marcus beside her. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming on short notice. Before we begin our formal session, I'd like to introduce Marcus Reed, whose courage last week has catalyzed the changes we're here to discuss. Marcus felt every eye in the room assessing him, saw the calculations happening behind professional smiles. Some saw a threat, others an opportunity. A few showed what looked like genuine respect. Catherine Hale stood from her seat and began to applaud. Slowly, others joined until the entire room was clapping, and Marcus stood there feeling exposed and uncomfortable and wondering if this was what victory was supposed to feel like. Hollow at the center, weighted with expectation, ultimately lonely, despite the crowd. Margaret gestured to an empty chair beside her own at the head of the table. Marcus sat, and the meeting began. What followed was 3 hours of corporate strategy and policy development, discussions about oversight committees and anonymous reporting systems and third-party investigations. Marcus understood perhaps a third of the technical language, but grasped the essential truth. They were trying to build structures that would outlast individual goodwill, systems that would make it harder for the next Victor Hale to abuse power unchecked. Whether it would work, whether corporations could truly reform themselves, or whether this was just expensive theater, remained to be seen. But at least they were trying, and that was more than had existed a week ago. Near the end of the meeting, Margaret turned to Marcus. "Mr. Reed, would you be willing to share any thoughts from your unique perspective?" Every head swiveled toward him. Marcus felt the familiar weight of command settling on his shoulders, the moment when silence ended and leadership required voice. He'd never wanted to speak in rooms like this, had deliberately chosen a life that didn't demand it. But circumstances had demanded it anyway, and he was here, and these people were waiting. "I'm not a business expert," he began carefully. "I don't understand most of what you've discussed today, but I understand people, and I know this. The real test of these reforms won't be how they look on paper or how they sound in press releases. It'll be what happens the first time someone low on the hierarchy challenges someone high up. It'll be whether your anonymous reporting systems actually protect people or just give them a false sense of security before they get fired for mysterious reasons. It'll be whether you really mean it when you say everyone matters, or whether that's just another corporate slogan that disappears when it becomes inconvenient." The room was absolutely still. Marcus continued, feeling his way through thoughts he hadn't fully formed until this moment. Victor Hale didn't wake up one day and decide to be cruel. He was shaped by a culture that rewarded his behavior, that looked the other way when he crossed lines, that prioritized results over how those results were achieved. Removing him from the CEO position is necessary, but it's not sufficient. You have to look at all the people who enabled him, who stayed silent, who told themselves that speaking up would only make things worse. And you have to ask, what would make those people believe that next time things would be different? Margaret leaned forward. What would make you believe it? Marcus considered the question seriously. If I saw someone speak up and get supported instead of punished, if I watched you protect a whistleblower even when it cost the company money or reputation, if you showed, through consistent action over time, that you really mean what you're saying today. He paused. Words are easy, Mrs. Hale. Victor Hale said a lot of words last week, and they turned out to be worth exactly nothing. Prove through your actions that your words are worth more. The meeting ended shortly after, board members filing out with the purposeful energy of people who needed to appear busy and important. Margaret caught Marcus's arm as he stood to leave. That was perfect, exactly what they needed to hear. Was it true, though? Are you really going to follow through, or was today just damage control? She met his eyes without flinching. I honestly don't know yet. I want to believe we can transform this culture. Whether we actually can, that depends on 100 factors, most of which are outside my direct control. But I promise you this. I will try every day, with every decision, I will try to build the company my husband envisioned instead of the one my son created. Then I hope you succeed. Marcus left Hale Industries for what he assumed was the last time, walking out through the lobby where a week ago Victor had humiliated him, where his careful anonymity had shattered, where everything had changed. He felt lighter somehow, as if he'd set down a burden that had been crushing him without his awareness. Outside, the October afternoon was bright and cool, the kind of day that made cities feel almost livable. Marcus walked without destination, just moving through streets until his phone rang with a number that made him stop cold. The area code was Virginia. The exchange suggested government offices. Someone from his past was calling, which meant someone had been paying attention to the news, had connected Marcus Reed the janitor to Captain Reed the ghost. He answered. "Reed." "Captain." The voice was older, gravelly, carrying the weight of too many years in command. "It's been a while." "Colonel Hendricks." Marcus felt his pulse quicken. "I'm surprised to hear from you." "Surprised I'm still alive, or surprised I tracked you down?" "Both." Hendricks chuckled. "I'm retired now, living in Annapolis, boring my grandkids with war stories they've heard too many times. But I still have friends in active service, and they tell me there's been chatter in certain circles about a former operator who just took down a billionaire using nothing but integrity and a willingness to tell the truth. That's an exaggeration." "Is it? Because from what I've read, you did something we spent decades trying to accomplish in uniform. You held powerful people accountable for their actions. That's rarer than you think, Reed, especially these days." Hendricks paused. "I'm calling to ask if you've given any thought to what comes next, because the skill set that made you successful in our world translates pretty well to certain civilian applications." "I'm 62 years old, Colonel. My operational days are behind me. I'm not talking about operations. I'm talking about leadership, about building ethical frameworks in organizations that desperately need them, about teaching younger people that character matters more than convenience." Hendricks' voice softened. "You were the best officer I ever served with, Reed. Not because you were the most tactical or the most aggressive, but because you never forgot that we were supposed to be the good guys. We need people like you in positions where that perspective shapes decisions." "What are you proposing?" "Nothing concrete yet. Just telling you that doors are open if you want to walk through them. Government consulting, private sector ethics training, veterans advocacy. Hell, write a book about leadership if you want. The point is, you have something valuable to offer, and you shouldn't waste it trying to disappear again." After hanging up, Marcus found himself standing outside a small park, watching children play while their parents watched from benches, all of them living ordinary lives that would never involve boardrooms or billionaires or decisions with stakes measured in billions. He'd thought he wanted that ordinariness, had convinced himself that invisible was the same as peaceful. But maybe invisible was just another form of hiding, and maybe after a career spent standing up to dangers most people couldn't imagine, he'd defaulted to invisibility because it was easier than continuing to fight. The question he faced now, standing in autumn sunlight while his old life and his possible new lives swirled around him, was whether easy had ever really been the point. Whether the man who'd led teams into impossible situations and brought them home had truly been satisfied mopping floors and asking for nothing. Whether Captain Marcus Reed had one more mission in him after all. Marcus spent Monday evening in his apartment reviewing the accumulated offers that had piled up over the past 72 hours. Legal firms wanted him as a consultant on workplace culture cases. Advocacy organizations needed someone who understood both corporate structures and ground-level realities. A documentary filmmaker wanted to tell his story. 2 different publishers had proposed book deals, one focused on workplace justice, the other on leadership principles from military to civilian life. He sorted them into 3 piles on his kitchen table, definite no, maybe, and ones that deserved serious consideration. The documentary went straight to the no pile. The book deals he set aside in maybe, uncertain whether he had anything worth saying at book length. The advocacy work landed in serious consideration, along with Colonel Hendricks's vague but intriguing suggestions about consulting. His phone rang at 8:47 p.m. David Cho. "Marcus, I wanted to give you a heads up before it hits tomorrow morning. Victor Hale just posted a video statement on social media." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. "What kind of statement?" "Public apology. To you specifically, and to everyone he's ever treated poorly during his career. It's—" Cho paused, seeming to search for words. "It's either genuine remorse or the most sophisticated piece of image rehabilitation I've ever seen. I honestly can't tell which." "Send me the link." Marcus watched the video 3 times, studying Victor Hale's face for signs of performance versus authenticity. The billionaire sat in what looked like a home office, no PR team visible, no corporate branding, just a man in a wrinkled shirt speaking directly to camera. "My name is Victor Hale, and I need to apologize," Victor began, his voice lacking its usual command. "Last week, I humiliated a man named Marcus Reed because he spilled water on my shoes. I called him worthless, interchangeable, nothing. I said things designed to make him feel as small as possible, because in that moment I was angry and stressed, and I took it out on someone who couldn't fight back. That was wrong, inexcusable, and I'm sorry." Victor looked down, seeming to gather himself, then continued. "But my behavior toward Marcus wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a pattern that goes back years. I've treated employees like resources to be used and discarded. I've prioritized profit over people, results over relationships, my own ego over basic human decency. I told myself this was necessary, that successful leadership required hardness, that being feared was more effective than being respected. I was wrong about all of it." The video continued for another 8 minutes, Victor detailing specific incidents where he'd crossed lines, naming people he'd hurt, acknowledging the culture he'd created and enabled. He announced that he was entering therapy, that he'd be donating a substantial portion of his wealth to organizations supporting workers' rights and workplace dignity, that he was committed to becoming someone his father would have been proud of instead of someone his success had made possible. "I don't expect forgiveness," Victor said near the end. "I don't deserve it. But I'm asking for the chance to do better, to learn from this, to become someone who understands that power is responsibility, not permission. And Marcus Reed, if you're watching this, thank you. For standing up when everyone else stayed silent. For refusing my money when taking it would have been easier. For forcing me to look at who I'd become. I hope someday I can apologize to you in person, as one human being to another, and that you'll believe I mean it." Marcus sat in silence after the video ended, trying to reconcile this vulnerable, remorseful Victor Hale with the arrogant billionaire who'd destroyed him in the lobby. People could fake remorse, of course, could hire coaches to teach them the language of accountability without internalizing any of it. But something in Victor's voice, in the way he couldn't quite meet the camera's eye when discussing his worst behaviors, suggested this might be real. Or maybe Marcus just wanted to believe that people could change, that cruelty wasn't permanent, that accountability could lead to transformation instead of just damage control. His phone buzzed with a text from Rosa. "Did you see it? What do you think?" Marcus typed back, "I think time will tell whether he means it. Words are easy." But even as he sent the message, he felt something shift in his chest. Not quite forgiveness, but perhaps the possibility of it, the understanding that holding on to anger served no one, least of all himself. Tuesday morning brought another unexpected visitor. Marcus was making coffee when his doorbell rang at 7:30 a.m. Through the peephole, he saw Victor Hale standing in his apartment building's dingy hallway, looking profoundly out of place in expensive casual clothes that probably cost more than Marcus's monthly rent. Marcus opened the door slowly. "Mr. Hale." "I know I should have called first." Victor's hands were in his pockets, his posture defensive. "But I was afraid if I called, you'd tell me not to come. And I needed—" He stopped, struggling with words. "Can we talk, please?" Marcus considered sending him away, maintaining the distance that seemed safest, but curiosity won. He stepped back, allowing Victor into his modest apartment. Victor looked around the small space with something like confusion, as if he couldn't quite process that people actually lived in homes this size. He moved to the window, looking out at the street below, then turned back to Marcus. "I watched my video a dozen times after posting it," Victor said. "Kept analyzing my own performance, wondering if I was being genuine or just saying what needed to be said. And I realized I honestly don't know anymore. I've spent so long being who I thought I needed to be that I'm not sure who I actually am underneath." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're the only person who has no reason to lie to me. Everyone else in my life wants something. My money, my connections, my approval. But you've already turned down my money. You don't need my connections. And you definitely don't care about my approval." Victor sat down uninvited on Marcus's small couch. So when you react to what I'm about to say, I'll know it's real. Marcus poured 2 cups of coffee and handed one to Victor, then sat in the chair across from him. What are you about to say? That I'm terrified. Genuinely terrified. Victor's hands shook slightly as he held the mug. I built my entire identity around being successful, powerful, important, and now all of that's gone. I'm not CEO anymore. The board is systematically dismantling everything I built. The business press is writing my obituary while I'm still alive, and I'm sitting in this apartment with a man I tried to destroy, asking for... He stopped, his voice breaking. I don't even know what I'm asking for. Absolution? Understanding? Permission to be human? Marcus sipped his coffee, taking time to formulate his response. You can't get those things from me, Mr. Hale. I'm not a priest or a therapist or whatever it is you need. I'm just someone you treated badly who refused to stay quiet about it. But you won. You beat me. You took everything I had and I didn't take anything. You destroyed yourself. I just refused to participate in covering it up. Marcus leaned forward. You want to know what I think? I think you're sitting here feeling sorry for yourself because you lost power, not because you hurt people. I think you're scared of being ordinary, not actually remorseful about the damage you caused. And I think this performance, because that's what it is, even if you don't fully realize it, is about trying to rebuild your image so you can eventually claw your way back to relevance. Victor flinched as if he'd been struck. That's not... I'm trying to change. To be better. Maybe. But change doesn't happen in a week. It happens over months and years of making different choices when no one's watching, when there's no reward for doing the right thing, except knowing you did it. Marcus set down his coffee. You want my forgiveness? Earn it. Not through grand gestures or public apologies, but through consistent, quiet, unremarkable decency over time. Help people who can't help you back. Use your wealth and connections to support workers instead of exploit them. Become someone who adds value to the world instead of extracting it. And if I do all that, if I actually change, will you forgive me then? I don't know. Maybe. But that can't be why you do it. You have to change because it's right, not because you want something from me or anyone else. They sat in silence for a long moment, the only sound the street noise filtering through the window. Cars, voices, the ambient hum of a city waking up to another ordinary day. Finally, Victor stood. Thank you for seeing me. For being honest, even when it wasn't kind. Kindness would have been telling you what you wanted to hear. Honesty is what you need. After Victor left, Marcus sat alone with his coffee and thought about the strange symmetry of the past week. He'd gone from invisible to visible, from powerless to powerful, from the bottom of the hierarchy to someone who could make billionaires come to his apartment begging for absolution. But underneath all the external changes, he was still just Marcus Reed, a 62-year-old man trying to figure out what mattered and how to live with integrity in a world that didn't always reward it. Wednesday brought a meeting Marcus had been both anticipating and dreading. He took the subway to Midtown and found himself standing outside a nondescript office building that housed the headquarters of the Veterans Leadership Institute, one of several organizations that had reached out with concrete proposals. The director, a woman named Patricia Coleman, who'd served as a colonel in Army intelligence, greeted him in a conference room with views of the East River. She was in her late 50s, sharp-eyed and no-nonsense, with the bearing of someone who'd commanded respect in environments that didn't give it easily. Captain Reed, thank you for coming. She gestured to a chair. I'll be direct because I know you appreciate that. We've been following your situation closely. What you did, standing up to institutional power using nothing but moral authority and a willingness to accept consequences, that's leadership. The kind we desperately need more of, especially in corporate environments where veterans often struggle to translate military values into civilian contexts. Marcus settled into the chair. I'm listening. We train veterans for leadership positions in the private sector. Executive coaching, organizational culture consulting, crisis management, essentially helping companies understand that the discipline and ethical frameworks that make military units effective can transform civilian workplaces too. Patricia pulled out a folder. We want you to lead our new corporate accountability program. You'd work with companies that are serious about reform, helping them build systems that prioritize dignity and fairness without sacrificing effectiveness. I'm not sure I'm qualified for that. I was a janitor a week ago. You were a decorated Special Forces officer who led some of the most complex operations in modern military history. Patricia's voice carried absolute certainty. Don't insult my intelligence by pretending you're just a janitor. You chose that work for your own reasons, and I respect that. But you're also someone who understands tactical thinking, systems analysis, leadership under pressure, and moral courage. That's exactly what we need. Marcus felt exposed. The careful cover story he'd maintained for 7 years stripped away by someone who'd obviously done thorough research. How much do you know about my service record? Enough to understand why it's mostly classified. Enough to know you're someone who made hard decisions in impossible situations and lived with the consequences. She met his eyes directly. I'm not asking you to talk about any of that. I'm asking you to use the wisdom you gained from it to help create corporate cultures where people like Victor Hale can't abuse power unchecked. They talked for 2 hours, Patricia laying out a vision of systemic change, driven by veterans who understood both hierarchy and humanity, who could speak the language of efficiency without abandoning ethics. She showed him case studies of companies they'd worked with, transformations that had taken years but produced lasting results. She talked about salary and benefits, and the freedom to shape the program according to his own vision. By the time Marcus left, he was carrying a formal offer letter and a sense that maybe, possibly, this could be the next chapter he'd been unconsciously searching for. Thursday afternoon, Marcus met with Margaret Hale one final time, at her request, in a small cafe far from Hale Industries headquarters. She was waiting when he arrived, looking tired but determined, the weight of interim CEO clearly taking its toll. How are you holding up? Marcus asked as he sat down. Exhausted, overwhelmed, questioning every decision. She smiled wryly. But also more alive than I've felt in years. Turns out actually trying to fix things is harder than just complaining about them from a board seat. Any regrets? About forcing Victor out? No. About the pain it's caused him? Every day. She stirred her coffee absently. He's my son. I love him even when I don't like him very much. But sometimes love means letting people face consequences instead of protecting them from reality. Marcus understood that better than she knew. He came to see me earlier this week. Margaret's eyes widened. He did? What did he want? Forgiveness, I think. Or maybe just someone to tell him he's not a monster. Marcus paused. I couldn't give him either of those things. Not yet. Maybe not ever. What did you give him? Honesty. The truth about what change actually requires. Marcus met her eyes. Do you think he's capable of it? Real change, not just performance? Margaret was quiet for a long moment, her face reflecting decades of knowing her son in all his complexity. I think he wants to be capable of it. Whether want is enough, that's the question that keeps me up at night. She set down her spoon. But that's not why I asked you here. I wanted to tell you that the reforms are moving forward. We've hired an independent firm to review every settlement over the past decade. We're implementing anonymous reporting systems with real protections, and we're creating an employee council with actual authority to challenge executive decisions. That's good, really good. It's a start. Whether it's enough, she echoed Marcus's earlier phrase. Time will tell, but I wanted you to know that what you did mattered. You changed this company, probably saved it, though we won't know that for years. She reached across the table and placed her hand over his. Thank you, Marcus, for your courage, for your integrity, for refusing to let my son's worst impulses define your worth. After they parted, Marcus walked through the city for hours, letting his feet carry him through neighborhoods he'd never visited, past lives he'd never lived, feeling the strange liberation of being untethered from his previous routine. The job at the Veterans Leadership Institute would start in 3 weeks if he accepted it. Patricia had given him until Monday to decide, understanding that choices this significant required time and space. Friday morning, Marcus woke early out of habit and realized he had nowhere he needed to be. No shift to work, no floors to clean, no routine to maintain. The freedom was disorienting, almost frightening in its openness. He made coffee and sat on his balcony, watching his neighborhood come to life. Parents walking children to school, workers heading to jobs. The ordinary machinery of ordinary lives continuing regardless of corporate drama, or personal transformation. His phone rang. Rosa. Marcus, I need you to come to the building right now. The urgency in her voice brought him instantly alert. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Just, please come. Third floor, as soon as you can. He dressed quickly and took the subway to Hale Industries, arriving at 9:30 a.m. to find the third floor packed with people. Maintenance staff, security personnel, administrative assistants, workers from every level of the organization crowded into the corridor. Rosa stood at the center, holding something wrapped in brown paper. What's going on? Marcus asked as people parted to let him through. We wanted to do this before you disappeared on us, Rosa said, her eyes bright. You changed things here, Marcus, not just for the executives or the board, but for us, for everyone who's ever been treated like we don't matter. She handed him the package. We all chipped in. It's not much, but open it. Marcus unwrapped the paper carefully. Inside was a framed photograph, the lobby of Hale Industries, pristine and perfect, with Marcus visible in one corner holding his mop. Across the bottom, signatures covered every inch of white matting, hundreds of names, each accompanied by a brief message. Thank you for standing up. You gave us hope. This is what courage looks like. You showed us we matter. Marcus felt his throat tighten, emotion threatening to overwhelm the composure he'd maintained through everything else. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, Daniel stepped forward. You just have to know that you weren't invisible to us. You never were, and what you did, it's going to echo through this place for years. Every time someone speaks up now, they'll remember that it's possible to challenge power and survive. That's your legacy here. Jennifer Walsh appeared from the crowd. There's one more thing. Mrs. Hale wanted you to have this personally. She handed him an envelope. Inside was a letter on Hale Industries letterhead, signed by every member of the board of directors. It read, Marcus Reed, in recognition of your integrity, courage, and unwavering commitment to human dignity, the board of directors of Hale Industries hereby awards you a lifetime pension equivalent to mid-level executive compensation, effective immediately. This is not a settlement or a buyout, but rather a small acknowledgement of the immeasurable value you brought to this organization, not through your work as a janitor, though you performed those duties with excellence, but through your example as a human being who refused to compromise his principles regardless of cost. You showed us what this company could be. We hope to become worthy of that vision. The pension amount was substantial enough that Marcus would never need to worry about money again. More importantly, it was offered without conditions, without NDAs, without anything except respect. Marcus looked up from the letter to find Rosa watching him with tears streaming down her face. We wanted to take care of you the way you took care of us. That's all. For the first time since this whole situation began, Marcus felt his own eyes burn. Not from anger or frustration or fear, but from the overwhelming recognition of being seen, being valued, being understood by people who'd shared his invisible world. Thank you, he managed to say. All of you. This means more than... His voice broke. Thank you. They gathered around him then, these people who'd worked beside him for 3 years, who'd watched him clean floors and empty trash and help whoever needed help. They shook his hand, hugged him, told him stories of small kindnesses he'd forgotten or never known had mattered. And Marcus understood that his impact hadn't been in the dramatic confrontation with Victor Hale or the article that changed everything. It had been in 3 years of consistent, quiet, unremarkable decency that had accumulated like compound interest until it became something that couldn't be dismissed. That evening, Marcus sat in his apartment surrounded by the photograph, the letter, the accumulated offers and opportunities and possibilities. He'd spent the past week being pushed and pulled by forces beyond his control, reacting to circumstances rather than shaping them. But now, finally, he had space to choose. He called Patricia Coleman at the Veterans Leadership Institute. I'm accepting your offer, he said without preamble. But I have conditions. I'm listening. I want to create a parallel program specifically for workers transitioning from low-wage positions into advocacy roles. People like Rosa, like Daniel, like everyone who's been dismissed because their job titles suggest they don't have valuable perspectives. I want to train them, support them, help them become the change agents their workplaces need. Patricia was quiet for a moment, then laughed with what sounded like delight. That's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. You're thinking about building a movement, not just a program. I'm thinking about making sure what happened at Hale Industries can happen everywhere. That people at every level understand they have power if they're willing to use it wisely. Marcus paused. And I want Rosa Martinez as my first hire. She's got more wisdom about workplace dynamics than most executives will ever have. Done. Anything else? I work from Queens. No corporate office, no suits, no pretending to be something I'm not. I'm a 62-year-old former soldier who just wants to help people stand up for themselves. Take it or leave it. Marcus, I wouldn't have you any other way. Saturday morning, 1 week exactly since David Cho's article had published, Marcus woke to find himself trending on social media again. But this time for a different reason. Someone had posted the photograph from Hale Industries, the one with hundreds of signatures, along with the story of the workers who'd honored him. The post had been shared tens of thousands of times, spawning conversations about dignity, respect, and the difference between power and authority. But what struck Marcus most were the stories in the comments. People sharing their own experiences standing up to workplace bullies. Others describing small acts of resistance that had led to larger changes. Veterans talking about translating military values into civilian contexts. Workers from every industry and income level finding common ground in the basic human need to be treated with respect. He'd become accidentally central to a conversation that was bigger than him, bigger than Hale Industries, bigger than any individual story. It was a conversation about what kind of society we wanted to be, about whether power should be allowed to exist without accountability, about the possibility of systems changing when enough people demanded it. Marcus called Rosa. I talked to Patricia Coleman yesterday. The Veterans Leadership Institute wants to hire you. Silence on the other end. Then quietly, Marcus, I'm 61 years old. I clean floors for a living. What would I possibly do at a leadership institute? Teach people what you taught me, that dignity isn't negotiable, that kindness isn't weakness, that the measure of an organization is how it treats people at the bottom, not the top. He paused. You've been leading your whole life, Rosa. You just did it without the title or the recognition. Now, you'd get both. I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it. We start in 3 weeks. Plenty of time to decide if you're ready to stop cleaning other people's messes and start helping them clean up their own. Sunday afternoon, Marcus received one final unexpected communication. An email from Victor Hale, short and direct. Marcus, I won't bother you again after this, but I wanted you to know I've signed over controlling interest in my personal wealth to a foundation dedicated to workers' rights and workplace dignity. It'll be run by an independent board, but I've recommended you as an advisory member if you're willing. No pressure, no expectation of forgiveness, just an acknowledgement that you were right and I was wrong about what matters. I hope someday to be someone worthy of the lesson you taught me. Until then, thank you for not giving up on the possibility that people can change, even people like me. Victor. Marcus read the email 3 times, searching for hidden agendas or performance, and found only what appeared to be genuine humility. Whether it would last, whether Victor would sustain this transformation, or revert to his worst instincts when public attention faded, remained uncertain. But the attempt mattered. The willingness to try mattered. He typed a brief response. I'll consider the advisory role. Not because I forgive you, but because the work matters more than our personal history. Use your resources wisely. Help people who need it. Prove through action that your words aren't empty. That's all any of us can do. 3 weeks later, Marcus stood in a conference room at the Veterans Leadership Institute, looking at 15 people who'd gathered for the inaugural session of the Worker Advocacy Training Program. Half were veterans like him, transitioning from military service to civilian activism. The other half were workers from various industries, a home health aide, a retail manager, a call center supervisor, a custodian, a food service worker, and Rosa, who'd taken the leap despite her fears. Welcome, Marcus began, feeling the familiar weight of command settling onto his shoulders, but lighter now, earned through choice rather than rank. You're here because you've decided that silence isn't acceptable anymore. That you're willing to stand up for dignity and fairness even when it's risky, even when it costs you something. He paused, looking at each face, seeing determination mixed with uncertainty, courage fighting against reasonable fear. I'm not going to lie to you. This work is hard. Speaking truth to power gets you labeled a troublemaker. Challenging systems gets you punished, at least initially. And sometimes, despite your best efforts, nothing changes and you're left wondering if it was worth it. Marcus felt Rosa's eyes on him, steady and supportive. But I'm here to tell you that it's always worth it. Not because you'll always win, but because the alternative, staying silent while people abuse power, makes you complicit. And some of us can't live with that. Over the next 6 months, Marcus built something he'd never imagined building. A network of trained advocates embedded in organizations across every sector, armed with tools and frameworks for creating accountability. Some were veterans bringing military discipline to civilian chaos. Others were workers who'd simply decided enough was enough and needed support to make their voices heard. Rosa became his secret weapon, the person who could speak to frontline workers in ways Marcus never could, who understood their fears and constraints because she'd lived them. Together, they created a program that didn't just train people to file complaints, but taught them to build coalitions, document patterns, create pressure that forced organizations to reform themselves. Hale Industries became their primary case study, not because it was perfect, but because it was trying. Margaret Hale remained as CEO, implementing reforms that other companies watched closely. Some worked brilliantly. Others failed and had to be redesigned. But the commitment to keep trying, to treat failure as data rather than excuse, set a standard that rippled outward. Victor Hale disappeared from public life for nearly a year, then reemerged as an advocate for corporate accountability, speaking at conferences about his own failures and what he'd learned from them. Some dismissed it as image rehabilitation. Others saw genuine transformation. Marcus watched from a distance, neither condemning nor endorsing, just acknowledging that people were complicated and change was possible but never guaranteed. The foundation Victor had created funded dozens of worker advocacy organizations, including the Veterans Leadership Institute. The advisory board meetings were initially awkward, Marcus and Victor navigating a relationship defined by past harm and potential future cooperation. But slowly, carefully, they found a working relationship built on mutual respect for the work rather than personal forgiveness. "I'll never be able to fully make up for what I did," Victor said during one meeting, 8 months after his resignation. "But I can spend the rest of my life trying. That has to be enough." Marcus nodded, understanding that some debts could never be fully repaid, some wounds never completely healed. The best anyone could do was acknowledge the harm, commit to doing better, and follow through consistently over time. A year after the incident in the Hale Industries lobby, David Cho published a follow-up article titled "The Janitor Who Changed Corporate America." It documented the ripple effects of Marcus's stand, the companies that had reformed their cultures, the workers who'd found courage to speak up, the systemic changes that were slowly, incrementally making workplaces more humane. The article ended with a quote from Marcus that captured everything he'd learned. "Power doesn't corrupt automatically. It reveals. It shows you who people really are when they don't have to pretend anymore. And accountability, real accountability, is what forces people to choose between who they are and who they want to be. Sometimes they choose growth. Sometimes they choose denial. But giving them that choice, making them face it, that's how systems change. One decision at a time, one person at a time, until enough people choose growth that the whole culture shifts." On the anniversary of the bucket spill, Marcus returned to Hale Industries at Margaret's invitation. The building looked the same from outside, but inside it had transformed in subtle ways. The lobby had a new installation, a wall honoring employees who'd shown exceptional courage in speaking up about problems, with Marcus's name listed first, but not prominently, just one among many who'd chosen integrity over comfort. Rosa was there, now working full-time at the Veterans Leadership Institute, but still maintaining connections with her former colleagues. Daniel had been promoted to head of security, implementing protocols that prioritized employee safety over executive convenience. Jennifer Walsh had restructured HR into a department with real power to investigate and discipline regardless of rank. They gathered in the lobby, these people who'd witnessed the beginning and helped shape what came after. No formal ceremony, no speeches, just colleagues sharing coffee and stories about the work continuing, the battles still being fought. the progress made and setbacks endured. Marcus stood near the spot where Victor had humiliated him, feeling the ghost of that moment hovering in the air. But it was just a ghost now, powerless to harm him, transformed from trauma into catalyst. Catherine Hale approached, carrying a small box. "I wanted to give you something. It was my father's." Inside was a simple brass compass, worn smooth by decades of handling. He used to say that leadership was about knowing your true north and holding to it even when storms tried to blow you off course. "I think he'd want you to have this. You're the best example of that principle I've ever seen." Marcus held the compass, feeling its weight, understanding the symbolism. "Thank you. I'll try to honor it." "You already have." As the gathering dispersed and people returned to their lives, Marcus stood alone in the lobby one final time. He thought about Captain Reed, the man who'd led missions in classified darkness. He thought about Marcus the janitor, who'd found peace in invisible service. And he thought about who he was now, someone who'd learned that you couldn't outrun yourself, that the skills and values that defined you would surface eventually, that running toward challenges was ultimately easier than running away. His phone buzzed. A text from Patricia. "New company asking for help. Tech startup, explosive growth, toxic culture developing. Interested?" Marcus smiled and typed back, "On my way." He walked out of Hale Industries into October sunshine, 1 year older than when this all started, infinitely different in ways that mattered. The building behind him would continue its transformation. Victor Hale would continue his journey toward redemption or reveal it as performance. The systems that created these problems would resist and adapt and sometimes change. But Marcus Reed, captain, janitor, advocate, teacher, bridge between worlds, had found his true north again. Not in the darkness of classified operations or the simplicity of invisible service, but in the messy, complicated, deeply human work of holding power accountable and helping people find their own courage. He'd learned that dignity was non-negotiable, that silence was complicity, that one person standing up could inspire hundreds to do the same. He'd learned that real strength was quiet, that real power was earned, and that real change happened when enough people decided they'd had enough. The subway carried him back to Queens, back to the apartment that had become headquarters for a movement he'd never intended to start. Rosa would meet him there in an hour to plan the next training session. A reporter from NPR wanted an interview about workplace advocacy. 3 different companies had reached out asking for help reforming their cultures. The work would never be finished. There would always be another Victor Hale, another crisis, another moment when someone had to choose between comfort and courage. But Marcus had learned something essential in that lobby a year ago. The choice was always worth making, the stand always worth taking, the risk always worth the potential reward. Because at the end of the day, when the titles and money and power faded away, all anyone had was their character, the person they'd chosen to be when it mattered, the legacy they left in the lives they touched. Marcus Reed, the janitor who made a billionaire kneel, had chosen well. And in choosing, he'd shown countless others that they could choose too. That was enough, more than enough. It was everything.